Good evening and welcome to the Sleepy Geographer. This is a space for quiet journeys into the landscapes and patterns that shape our world, told gently to help you wind down and drift into rest. Tonight, we're turning our attention to the suburbs, those quiet places that stretch between city centres and open countryside, where houses line neat streets, lawns meet sidewalks, and everyday life unfolds in a softer rhythm. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? It's always fascinating to see the variety of places that people tune in from, and it makes these journeys feel even more connected. If you enjoy these calm explorations, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing for more. To those of you already subscribed, thank you sincerely, and you're the reason these journeys keep going. And don't worry, I promise not to make the suburbs too exciting. I hope this story carries you gently towards sleep, but if it keeps you awake, at least you'll wake up a little wiser about zoning, cul-de-sacs, and the curious geography of edges. So why have suburbs risen so quietly yet so powerfully across the world, and what do they reveal about how people live at the edge of the city? Suburbs can feel like the most ordinary of places, yet their growth has been one of the defining transformations of modern geography. To understand them is to trace the story of how cities expand, how people seek space and comfort, and how the built environment adapts to shifting needs and dreams. A suburb is never quite city and never quite countryside. It exists as a liminal zone, a middle ground where commuters, families and landscapes all meet in patterns shaped by history, technology and planning. This video will unfold that story in a gentle rhythm, one chapter at a time. We will wander through the first rail suburbs of the 19th century, where homes clustered around stations like pearls on a string. We will step into the car-shaped world of the 20th century, where cul-de-sacs curled like sleeping cats, and driveways became the stage for daily comings and goings. Along the way, we'll pause to notice the subtle rules of zoning and land use, the invisible infrastructure beneath our feet, and the sounds and textures that give the suburban landscape its unique character. The goal here is not to rush, but to let the suburbs reveal themselves slowly. There is history in every street pattern, culture in every park and school, and ecology in every tree planted along a winding road. Suburbs may look uniform at first glance, but their variety is vast. From the greenbelt towns of Britain to the station suburbs of Japan, from the sprawling edges of American cities to the informal settlements on the outskirts of the global south. What makes suburbs endlessly fascinating is how they reflect our balance between convenience and calm, between connection and privacy. They're shaped by economics and policy, but also by hope, the hope of a small garden, a safe street, or a quiet night where the only sound is the hum of a distant highway. By the end of this journey, you may find yourself seeing the ordinary suburbs around you in a new light, not just as rows of houses, but as the living geography of modern life. And perhaps, the next time you walk down a quiet street at dusk, you'll hear in its stillness the echoes of a much larger story. When you hear the word suburb, you might picture rows of tidy houses, a sprinkling of trees, perhaps a small park tucked between cul-de-sacs. But defining what exactly makes a place suburban is more complicated than it first appears. Geography, after all, is never as simple as drawing a line on a map. Instead, it's about gradients, layers, and shades of in-between. One way to think of it is as a transition zone. Imagine standing in the centre of a great city. Around you are tall buildings, buzzing streets, and public squares filled with activity. Step outward a little, and the towers shrink. The density softens, and you begin to notice more houses than apartments, more driveways than tram stops. Keep moving, and the space between things grows wider still, until finally you're in open countryside where farms and fields stretch without interruption. Suburbs live in that middle ground, not fully city, not fully rural, but borrowing qualities from both. Planners and geographers try to pin it down more precisely. Some use zoning laws as their guide. Areas dominated by the single-family housing with separated land uses fall under the suburban umbrella. Others point to population density, suggesting that once you move below a certain threshold of people per square kilometre, you've crossed into the suburban territory. Another measure looks at commute patterns. If most residents travel daily into the city for work, but return each evening to quieter, lower-density neighbourhoods, then those neighbourhoods are suburban by function, even if they lie within city limits on paper. The truth is, suburbs resist a single definition because they are many things at once. They are shaped by culture, by economy, and by history. A suburb on the edge of Tokyo feels very different from one near Los Angeles or London, even though all are called suburban. Each reflects the society that created it. Yet beneath those differences, they share a common role. They are the spaces where cities breathe outward. They are, in a sense, the places where the city exhales. If you close your eyes and imagine the soundscape of a suburb, it carries its own quiet character. At dusk you might hear the distant horn of a passing train, its echo softened by rows of houses. Sprinklers chatter across neat lawns, keeping the grass green in climates where nature alone would never provide such uniform colour. The air is calmer here, still carrying the hum of nearby highways but softened by trees and hedges. Occasionally a dog barks, a garage door rumbles shut, or the faint notes of a television drift through an open window. It is an edge space, filled with small sounds that contrast sharply with the roar of the downtown or the hush of an empty countryside. Suburbs are not just physical spaces, but also ideas. In many countries they are tied to notions of home ownership, stability, and family life. They embody the dream of having just enough land to plant a garden or to give children a backyard to play in. In other regions they are associated with opportunity, a first step away from the crowded city towards something a little quieter, a little more controlled. At the same time, suburbs have also been criticised as spaces of monotony, where sameness spreads mile after mile and individuality can feel lost among identical rooftops. This tension is part of what makes suburbs so fascinating. They can be celebrated as havens of comfort and safety, yet just as easily described as dull or isolating. Both perspectives hold truth, because suburbs are not one singular thing. They are mosaics, endlessly varied, stretching from garden city ideals with leafy boulevards to endless tracts of uniform housing, stamped out quickly during boom times. It helps to think of them as zones of compromise. Cities need space to expand, and people often seek a balance between access to urban opportunities and the calm of a more spacious environment. Suburbs provide that balance, imperfect as it may be. They are where infrastructure and desire meet. The roads, the rails, the zoning codes, and the dreams of those who move there. Consider how suburbs are described statistically. Demographers may note the percentage of detached homes, the ratio of car ownership, the distance to the nearest downtown core. Economists may look at housing prices relative to city centres. Social geographers, meanwhile, notice patterns of community formation, migration, and identity. Each discipline slices the suburban experience differently, but all circle the same core, a place on the edge, shaped by the pull of the city and the push of the countryside. If you've ever wandered through one at twilight, you know how distinctive they feel. Streets bend into crescents or dead ends, designed to slow cars and create quieter pockets of space. Trees line the verges, sometimes young and neat, sometimes old and arching overhead. The lighting is gentle, often just a few street lamps, casting amber pools of glow on the pavement. The day winds down with children playing their last game of catch, or joggers moving silently beneath a pale sky. This landscape is not accidental. It is the result of decades of design choices, policies, and cultural preferences. But at its heart, the suburb is still that threshold, that middle ground. It is not quite one thing or another, but a blend that allows millions to live with one foot in the urban world and one foot in the rural. So when you hear the word suburb, let it mean more than a stretch of rooftop seen from the highway. Let it call to mind this rich in-between, the gradients of density, the zoning lines that quietly shape daily life, the commuter patterns that draw people into the city each morning and release them back each evening. A suburb is many things at once. Ordinary, yes, but also deeply revealing of how societies organise space and pursue comfort. Before the cul-de-sac, there was the rail. Long before cul-de-sacs curled their sleepy arms across the landscape, the first suburban forms were pulled outward by the whistle of the train and the clang of the tram bell. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, suburbs grew not from the spread of cars, but from the steady beat of steel wheels on iron rails. Cities were swelling with factories and workers, streets were clogged with horse carts and early motor cars, and people with the means to move a little further afield began to look for somewhere quieter. The railway and the tram offered just that, a ticket to space, light and fresh air, while still keeping the city close enough for a daily commute. These were the rail suburbs, early experiments in living just beyond the core. They sprouted first along commuter rail lines, fanning out from cities such as London, Paris, Boston and Melbourne. A station would open, and before long houses would cluster nearby like barnacles on a rock, each family eager to be within walking distance of the platform. Step out your front door, stroll along a lane lined with modest cottages, or grander villas depending on wealth, and within a few minutes you could be at the station. From there, the city was only a train ride away. The geography of these rail suburbs was shaped as much by distance as by desire. People were willing to walk perhaps 10 minutes to catch their train. This simple measure, the length of time someone would comfortably spend on foot, became the invisible compass of suburban growth. Draw a circle around each station, perhaps half a mile in radius, and within it you would find houses, schools, and often a little main street of shops. Beyond that circle, the farmland remained largely intact until the next station provided another pocket of growth. It gave the landscape a necklace pattern, settlements strung like beads along the railway lines. Tram suburbs had a similar rhythm, though on a smaller scale. Trams radiated out from the city centre like spokes on a wheel, running down streets lined with houses, corner shops and small businesses. Because trams stopped more frequently than trains, the development they'd encouraged was finer grained, with denser strings of housing stretched along each route. A main street often emerged at the tram stop, anchored by a grocery, a post office, perhaps a butcher or baker. The tram lines stitched together a patchwork of walkable neighbourhoods, each tied into the pulse of the larger city. The architecture of these early suburbs reflected both aspiration and practicality. In Britain, rows of semi-detached houses with tidy front gardens became common. In the United States, wooden frame houses with porches faced leafy streets. In Australia, the California bungalow style flourished, while in continental Europe, compact cottages and villas mixed with apartment blocks near the stations. What united them was their orientation. Doors and windows facing the street, people stepping out to walk to the station, a rhythm of daily life based on foot travel and rail schedules. Shops nestled close to these stations formed small commercial hearts. You might find a bakery selling warm loaves just before the morning train, or a tobacconist and newsstand where commuters grabbed their paper before boarding. In the evenings, the same shops catered to returning workers. These nodes were lively, human-scaled, and accessible. The rhythms of the day revolved around the departure board rather than the turning of an ignition key. It's important to remember that these rail suburbs were not universally accessible. Tickets cost money, and the idea of commuting was first taken up by the middle and upper classes. A clerical worker, a lawyer, or a manager could justify the time and expense of the daily ride. Working-class families often remained in the inner city, closer to factories and workshops. Still, as railway networks expanded and fares dropped, more people were drawn into the suburban orbit, reshaping social geography as well as physical landscapes. One fascinating feature of the rail suburb era was the relationship between railway companies and property development. In some cities, the very companies that laid the tracks also built the houses. They had a vested interest in populating their lines with paying passengers, so they marketed suburban living aggressively. Brochures promised clean air, green spaces, and moral uplift compared to the smoke and vice of the crowded city centre. Living in a suburb, the adverts declared, was healthier for your children, better for your pocket, and more dignified for your standing in society. It was a dream sold with timetables and mortgage offers. The effect on urban form was profound. Instead of cities growing as solid circles expanding outward, they began to stretch like stars, with fingers of development following the railway lines. This pattern is still visible on many maps today. Dense corridors of settlement radiating outwards, separated by wedges of open land or farmland. Only later, when cars filled the gaps, did those fingers join to form continuous blankets of suburbia. Daily life in a rail suburb had a distinctive tempo. Mornings saw small crowds gathering at stations, hats and briefcases in hand, chatting politely while waiting for the train. Children walked to local schools, mothers visited shops on the high street, and afternoons brought quieter streets until the evening rush of returning commuters. The sounds were gentle, the screech of wheels on rails, the hiss of steam engines, the bell of a tram stopping at the corner. At night, the station lamps glowed softly and the rhythm reset for the next day. Even within the same city, rail suburbs varied widely. Some were leafy and affluent, with wide avenues and large homes. Others were modest, with compact streets and small houses. What they shared was dependence on the timetable and the certainty that life was organised around the station. This created a sense of cohesion. Neighbours often commuted together, met on the platform, and shared routines. The station was not only a transport hub, but a social one. It is easy to romanticise these places, and indeed many still retain their charm. Yet they also came with challenges. Overcrowding at peak times was common. Fares were a burden for some, and reliance on a single rail line meant vulnerability to strikes or service disruptions. Still, the advantages of cleaner air, more space, and the feeling of escape from industrial smoke drew countless families outward. If you look closely, remnants of the rail suburb era remain visible today. Around many older stations, you can still find clusters of early 20th century houses, high streets with small shops, and walkable grids. Even in places now surrounded by highways and parking lots, the bones of the old pattern endure. Hints of a time when the suburb meant walking to a station rather than driving to a garage. These first edges were delicate yet decisive. They showed how technology could stretch a city, altering the balance between distance and accessibility. By tying daily life to rails and trams, they created new geographies of work, leisure, and home. The suburb, once an idea, became a physical reality. The arrival of the motorcar transformed not only how people travelled, but also how they built their homes, neighbourhoods, and entire cities. Trains and trams had shaped suburbs along linear lines, their reach limited to walking distances from the station. Cars, however, shattered those limits. Suddenly, distance was elastic. A commute that once seemed impossible became manageable, and the suburbs began to spread outward, no longer bound to the rhythm of railway timetables. The age of the automobile ushered in an entirely new kind of suburban form. Instead of neat crescents radiating from train stations, there emerged vast networks of curving streets, cul-de-sacs, and looping drives. At the heart of this was the road hierarchy, a system designed to funnel traffic smoothly from tiny residential lanes to larger collector roads, then onto arterial avenues and finally highways. Like a set of veins leading to larger arteries, the design carried cars from doorsteps to distant workplaces, schools and shops. This hierarchy meant that not every street was equal. The cul-de-sac with its rounded end symbolised quiet domesticity, a place where children could play ball without the threat of through traffic. From there, cars would filter onto slightly bigger streets, before eventually meeting the roaring multi-lane highways that carried commuters into the city each morning. The map of suburbia became less about walking distances and more about turning radii and traffic flow. The car also introduced a new feature into the suburban landscape: the garage. At first, it was often a detached shed at the back of the lot, a simple structure to shield the vehicle from rain and snow. Over time, the garage migrated forward, attaching itself to the house, sometimes even dominating the facade. This subtle shift had enormous consequences. The front of the home, once a space of porches and gardens where neighbours might wave to one another, became increasingly shaped by driveways and wide garage doors. Each evening, as people returned from work, the garage door would rise, the car would roll inside, and then the door would close with a low rumble, a nightly curtain falling on the stage of suburban life. Driveway culture soon followed. The driveway became not just a place to park, but a stage for social rituals. Washing the car on a Sunday morning, tinkering with an engine, or teaching a teenager to ride a bike along the smooth concrete, all became familiar suburban scenes. Neighbours stopped for chats by the mailbox or exchanged a quick wave as they pulled in or out. The space in front of the house was no longer just a lawn, but an interface between private life and the wider road network. Cars also influenced the very geometry of suburban design. Road engineers calculated turning radii to ensure that vehicles, especially delivery trucks and fire engines, could navigate bends and intersections. The width of the streets, the length of blocks, even the placement of streetlights were all shaped with the automobile in mind. Sidewalks, once central to daily life, often shrank or disappeared altogether, replaced by the long stretches of asphalt, designed to prioritise smooth driving. The rhythm of the suburb now pulsed to the acceleration of engines rather than the footsteps of commuters. The change in daily routine was profound. Where once people walked to the local station or tram stop, they now climbed into cars for nearly every errand. Grocery shopping shifted from small high street shops to larger supermarkets reachable only by car. Schools were built further from homes, with long queues of vehicles at drop-off and pick-up times. Leisure activities too became car-dependent. Cinemas, malls and sports fields were all designed with vast parking lots as their first feature. In many places, the suburban landscape was no longer simply residential. It was an interconnected web of car-oriented destinations. This expansion had a psychological dimension as well. Cars promised independence. A family could move further from the crowded city, confident that the daily commute would remain possible. Teenagers gained a new kind of freedom when they received their driver's license, able to escape the orbit of the cul-de-sac for the first time. The sense of mobility extended life's possibilities, but it also created dependence. For many suburban households, daily life without a car became nearly unthinkable. The design of suburban homes reflected this dependency. Living rooms shifted to the back, facing private gardens rather than the street, while front yards often became smaller to make room for wider driveways. Cul-de-sacs were celebrated for their tranquility, yet they also reduced connectivity. A trip on foot to the neighbour behind your house might take only a few minutes as the crow flies, but along the winding suburban street pattern it could stretch into a long walk. The network worked beautifully for cars, less so for pedestrians. With the car came new patterns of time. Rush hour became the dominant pulse of the suburban day, with long streams of cars flowing out toward the city in the morning and trickling back in the evening. Roads filled with red taillights and silver hoods, each commuter enclosed in their own steel capsule. This rhythm defined not just individual households, but the design of entire regions, as suburbs stretched further and further outward to accommodate the growing population and their automobiles. Of course, these patterns also had their costs. Traffic congestion became a daily frustration, smog and emissions a growing environmental concern, and isolation a social side effect. Yet for many, the benefits outweighed the downsides. The promise of a private house, a patch of lawn, and the freedom of personal transport was an irresistible dream, made tangible by the automobile. The cul-de-sac, emblematic of this era, embodied both the charm and the challenges of motor-age suburbia. On the one hand, it was quiet, safe, and intimate, a place where neighbours often knew one another. On the other, it limited walking, forced reliance on cars, and created networks that were difficult to navigate for those without vehicles. Still, for countless families, it became the ideal, a peaceful retreat from the noisy city, accessible only by car, protected by design. Look closely at any suburban map from the mid-20th century, and you can see this car-shaped logic drawn across the land. Curved streets flow into collectors, loops branch from arterials, and highways bind it all together in an immense asphalt web. It was a geography of mobility, designed not around the station platform but around the driveway. The motor age suburbanized not just land, but also lifestyles. From the architecture of houses to the layout of neighbourhoods, from the timing of commutes to the rituals of family life, the car became the silent planner, the invisible architect of everyday geography. And even today, each evening as garage doors close like curtains, you can hear the echoes of that transformation. If the motorcar was the loud and obvious driver of suburban growth, zoning was its quieter companion, humming along in the background and shaping neighbourhoods with a more subtle hand. Zoning is, at its core, a set of rules, but rules that reach into nearly every detail of suburban life. It tells you not only what can be built on a piece of land, but also how tall it can be, how far it must stand from the street, how much of the plot it may cover, and even what activities may or may not take place there. In short, zoning is the quiet composer of suburbia, writing the score to which the landscape moves. One of the most influential of these rules has been single-family zoning. This is the idea that a plot of land should hold only one dwelling meant for one household. It may sound simple, but its consequences are profound. In cities across the 20th century, especially in the United States, vast areas were zoned exclusively for detached houses. This meant no apartments, no corner shops tucked into the street, no duplexes or row houses. The result was neighbourhoods that were strikingly uniform, where houses of similar size and type stretched block after block, each with its own yard, each set back politely from the street. Those setbacks are another quiet tool of zoning. A setback is the required distance between a building and the property line. It might be 10 feet in the front, 5 feet on each side, 20 feet at the back. Multiply those invisible margins across an entire neighbourhood, and you create wide green strips, front lawns that separate homes from the street, and the spacious feeling we often associate with suburbia. On corner lots, setbacks sometimes grow even larger, forcing houses to stand back as if bowing to the flow of traffic around them. These quirks make corner homes distinctive, sometimes with triangular yards or angled driveways that reveal the compromises of geometry when rules meet irregular plots. Lot size is another piece of the puzzle. Zoning codes often specify a minimum lot area, say 6,000 square feet, which prevents landowners from dividing their property into smaller, denser plots. This ensures that houses remain relatively spread out with enough space for lawns, trees, and garages. While it creates a sense of openness, it also limits diversity in housing. Smaller, more affordable units are often excluded by these standards, shaping not just the look of a neighbourhood but also who can afford to live there. Then there is the floor area ratio, often shortened to FAR. This measure sets the maximum amount of building you can construct relative to the size of the lot. Imagine a plot of land 10,000 square feet in size with a FAR of 0.5. That means the building on it can have at most 5,000 square feet of floor space. A higher FAR allows denser development, while a lower one enforces spread out homes with ample yards. This mathematical little rule quietly sculpts skylines, ensuring that in some areas roofs peak modestly, while in others they may stretch upwards into towers. Zoning also extends into the uses of land. It separates residential from commercial, industrial from agricultural. In practice, this means you rarely see a bakery tucked into the corner of a suburban street or an apartment building standing next to a detached house. Instead, shops are clustered in designated commercial zones, factories placed far away, and homes insulated from anything that might be considered disruptive. These are the bylaws that politely say, "Not here, thank you." They enforce order, reduce conflict between land uses, and create predictability. At the same time, they also create long journeys, as daily errands now require hopping into a car to reach distant shopping centres. The history of zoning is as much social as it is technical. In many places, it was originally framed as a way to protect public health and safety. Separating housing from smoky factories or noisy workshops had obvious benefits, but zoning also carried with it values and assumptions, ideas about what an ideal neighbourhood should look like, who it should house, and what kind of life it should foster. In some cases, it was even used as a tool for exclusion, keeping out certain building types and, by extension, certain populations. The suburban ideal was often coded into the zoning map itself. Zoning's influence reaches down into the fine-grained texture of suburban life. Why do so many houses line up neatly with their front doors facing the street? Why are garages set back at particular distances? Why do side yards seem almost suspiciously uniform in width? Much of this is not chance but ordnance, rules written in planning codes decades ago. Even the presence of cul-de-sacs owes something to zoning and subdivision regulations that encourage street patterns limiting through traffic. The suburban landscape, then, is not just a spontaneous sprawl of houses, but the outcome of countless invisible decisions written into municipal law. There are, of course, debates about whether zoning should be so strict. Some argue that it locks neighbourhoods into rigid patterns, preventing them from evolving as needs change. Others say that without zoning, conflicting uses would clash, lowering quality of life. Both views have merit, and the truth is that zoning remains a balancing act. Stability on one side, flexibility on the other. For residents, zoning can feel both invisible and deeply personal. You may never read the municipal code, but you live within its lines every day. It decides whether you can add an extension to your house, build a second unit in your backyard, or open a small cafe from your kitchen. It shapes whether your neighbourhood stays frozen in time or slowly adapts with duplexes and accessory dwellings. Zoning is rarely dramatic, but it is always present, quietly orchestrating the shape of the world outside your window. Even its language carries a sort of dry poetry. Terms like non-conforming use, conditional permit, and variance roll off the tongues of planners and lawyers but translate in plain English to the flexibility or rigidity of daily life. Every once in a while, these technical terms make headlines when disputes arise, but for the most part they go unnoticed, like sheet music quietly guiding the orchestra of suburbia. And so the suburb is not just the product of cars, culture and commerce, but of these silent codes. Zoning works behind the scenes, setting the rhythm of setbacks and the harmonies of lot sizes, ensuring that garages line up like chords in a progression. It is the quiet composer of suburbia, writing rules that households follow without even realising they are part of the score. When you look at a suburban street, what you see is only half the story. Houses, sidewalks, lawns and lampposts form the visible surface, but beneath them lies a hidden world that makes all of it possible. Every shower taken, every light switched on, every message sent through the internet depends on a dense lattice of pipes, wires, and drains humming silently beneath the ground. This infrastructure rarely announces itself, yet it is the foundation on which suburban life rests. Consider water first, the most basic service of all. Suburbs thrive because clean, pressurized water flows reliably into every kitchen sink and bathroom tap. Beneath the quiet street lies a network of water mains, pipes of varying diameter branching outward from reservoirs or treatment plants. Larger mains run along arterial roads, with smaller distribution pipes feeding side streets and cul-de-sacs. Engineers calculate service radii, making sure that pressure remains high enough for every household, even those at the farthest reaches. Fire hydrants punctuate these systems at carefully measured intervals, their presence a reminder that water is not only for domestic comfort but also for safety in emergencies. Flowing alongside the water mains are pipes carrying wastewater away. Sewer networks are less glamorous, but equally vital, sloping gently downhill toward treatment plants or pumping stations. Every flush and every drain feeds into this system, and its reliability is so taken for granted that it becomes almost invisible. The slope of the land, the diameter of the pipes, even the placement of manhole covers are all carefully planned to ensure gravity does its work. Storm drains add another layer, capturing rainwater from gutters and streets. In heavy storms, you can hear the sudden rush as water disappears into grates, whisked away beneath the pavement. On quiet nights, the sound of rain dripping steadily into gutters is a reminder of the hidden channels working tirelessly below. Electricity has its own underground or overhead presence. Suburban streets are often laced with distribution lines, carrying power from substations into individual homes. Some places bury these lines for aesthetics or safety, while others let them run from pole to pole, a visible reminder of the network that keeps refrigerators humming and lamps glowing. Transformers, those grey cylinders you see on utility poles or the green boxes tucked into corners of lawns, step down voltage so it can safely enter houses. Every time a garage door rises with a low whir or a phone charges silently on the nightstand, the current behind it traces back through a web of copper and steel. In the modern suburb, broadband internet is nearly as essential as electricity. Fibre optic cables snake beneath pavements, sometimes running right to the door in newer developments, other times looping around from cabinets at the ends of blocks. Routers blink quietly in living rooms and bedrooms, tiny constellations of green or blue lights that mark the constant movement of data across the globe. Just as water pipes deliver a steady flow, so too do these invisible streams of information, carrying video calls, films, and late-night searches across continents in the blink of an eye. Without them, suburbs would feel not just disconnected but almost uninhabitable to many of today's residents. The hidden systems work together like layers of an orchestra. Each has its own role, yet they must be carefully coordinated. For example, water mains and sewer pipes cannot be too close to avoid contamination. Electric lines need clearance from gas lines. Fibre optic cables require access points for maintenance. Beneath an ordinary road, there might be 5 or 6 different utilities sharing space in a careful choreography. When a street is dug up for repair, it is often because one of these buried lifelines needs attention, whether it's a cracked sewer, a leaking water main, or a cable upgrade. These systems also influence the rhythm of suburban growth. Developers calculate how many homes a water main can serve, how far a substation can distribute power, or how many households a broadband node can handle before the service slows. Service radii determine the placement of parks, hydrants, or even cell towers. The invisible grid beneath the ground sets the boundaries for what can be built above it, dictating density and form just as powerfully as zoning laws or road layouts. Stormwater deserves a special mention because in many suburbs it has shaped the very design of streets. Wide gutters and the retention ponds absorb heavy rainfall, protecting houses from flooding. In newer neighbourhoods, you may find bioswales or rain gardens built into verges, designed to capture and filter runoff naturally. The sight of water moving through these channels, whether trickling gently on a spring night or rushing after a summer storm, is a reminder that suburbia depends on constant negotiation with nature's flows. There's also an economic geography to this hidden web. Installing miles of pipe, wire and conduit is expensive, and suburbs that sprawl further out strain these networks. Longer water lines lose pressure, longer power lines face more transmission losses, and long commutes stretch road capacity. Engineers are constantly balancing the efficiency of centralized systems with the demands of far-flung development. Even the decision to build a new subdivision often hinges not on whether there is enough land, but on whether the infrastructure beneath can carry the load. Despite their importance, these systems rarely draw attention unless they fail. A burst water main, a blackout during a storm, or an internet outage reminds everyone of their presence. Otherwise, they hum along silently, supporting everyday life without fanfare. Children play above them, cars drive across them, dogs sniff at their access panels, and no one thinks twice. Yet without this buried machinery, the suburban dream of safe, comfortable living would collapse in an instant. At night, these networks reveal themselves in subtle ways. Rain rattles softly into drains, flowing unseen toward culverts and channels. Street lamps flicker on one by one, their light carried through wires strung across poles or buried below. Routers blink in darkened rooms like fireflies, signals pulsing invisibly across the neighbourhood. In their quiet way, these sounds and lights remind us that suburbs are not just built landscapes but engineered ecosystems, sustained by hidden systems working ceaselessly below the surface. Beneath every lawn and driveway lies a kind of parallel city, a second network that mirrors the one above ground. Where the surface has roads and sidewalks, the underground has pipes and conduits. Where the surface has houses and shops, the underground has junction boxes and valves. This unseen city has no skyline, yet it holds suburbia together more securely than any landmark. Suburbs are not just collections of houses lined along quiet streets. What gives them life are the everyday anchors, the schools where children gather each morning, the parks where people stroll or play in the afternoon, and the shops where groceries and small essentials are picked up. These nodes of activity provide the rhythm to suburban existence, shaping how time is spent, where neighbours cross paths, and what patterns define daily life. Without them, a suburb would be little more than a scattering of rooftops. Take schools, for instance. In many suburbs, schools are carefully positioned within catchment areas, invisible zones drawn across the map that determine where a child is enrolled. These boundaries shape not only education but also property values, commuting patterns, and even a sense of local identity. Parents often consider the reputation of a school before deciding to buy a house, and the lines on a catchment map can cause one street's homes to sell for noticeably more than those just around the corner. Every morning the streets around schools come alive with movement. Lines of cars dropping off children, clusters of students walking or cycling, yellow buses rumbling through intersections. The school bell is more than a sound, it is daily metronome, setting a pace for the whole neighbourhood. Walking routes to schools reveal the logic of suburban design. Some areas have sidewalks and safe crossings where children can wander in groups with little worry. In others, the dominance of cars makes walking impractical, and parents ferry children back and forth, creating traffic jams of minivans outside the gates. These differences reflect decades of planning choices about pedestrian infrastructure and street layouts. In suburbs with thoughtful design, the journey to school becomes a social ritual, a daily thread that weaves children and families into the wider fabric of the neighbourhood. Parks form the second anchor, green lungs scattered among the rooftops. Many planning standards recommend that every home be within a 10-minute walk of a park, and while reality doesn't always match the aspiration, it has shaped countless suburban layouts. These green patches come in many forms: pocket parks with a single playground and a bench, larger neighbourhood parks with ball fields and trails, or broad green belts threading through cul-de-sacs. Parks serve as stages for community life: birthday parties under picnic shelters, teenagers gathering after school, dog walkers tracing loops at dusk. In the quiet of night, parks become dark expanses that hold the memory of the day's activity, their trees whispering in the breeze as the suburb sleeps. What makes parks special is their multifunctionality. They are spaces of recreation, of ecology, of rest. A child might climb the same slide where a jogger begins their morning run, while birds nest in branches above and stormwater trickles through drainage channels below. Parks are democratic in the truest sense, free to enter, open to all, and used in different ways by different people. They offer a kind of relief from the geometry of houses and streets, a reminder that even in highly planned landscapes, nature still has a foothold. The third everyday anchor is commerce, the places where people go to shop, eat and run errands. Early suburbs often revolved around small main streets near tram or rail stops, where bakeries, butchers and grocers clustered together. With the rise of the automobile, these gave way to strip malls and later large shopping centres, their vast parking lots designed for easy access by car. The strip mall, with its row of storefronts facing an asphalt sea, became a defining feature of post-war suburban landscapes. It may lack charm, but it provides convenience: a bank, a laundromat, a pizzeria, all lined up in one place. Later came the indoor shopping mall, climate-controlled world of corridors, food courts, and anchor department stores. For decades, malls were more than shopping hubs. They were social spaces where teenagers loitered, families spent weekends, and retirees walked laps before opening hours. In many suburbs, the mall was the civic centre in all but name, even if its design was more commercial than communal. In recent years, as malls decline, some have been reinvented as mixed-use town centres, with open-air plazas, apartments above shops, and pedestrian-friendly promenades that try to recreate the feel of an old main street. The evolution from main street to strip mall to town centre reflects larger shifts in how suburbs balance commerce and community. Where once every errand was within walking distance, the car age stretched errands further apart. Now, a slow return to walkability and mixed-use design hints at a desire for something more human-scaled, even within car-dominated landscapes. Regardless of form, the role of shops remains the same. They provide the everyday necessities that tie a community together, whether it's bread, milk, or a haircut. These anchors, schools, parks, shops, are more than conveniences. They create focal points, giving shape to the otherwise sprawling grid of houses. They also form the stages where social interaction happens. Parents meet other parents at school gates, neighbours bump into one another while jogging in the park, strangers nod hello in the grocery aisle. In these small exchanges, a neighbourhood becomes more than just a set of addresses. It is worth noting that not all suburbs enjoy equal access to these anchors. Some are blessed with leafy parks, excellent schools and vibrant shopping areas, while others suffer from underinvestment, leaving residents with long drives to reach the basics. The geography of everyday anchors reflects broader inequalities, shaping life chances and quality of experience. A suburb with well-placed parks and schools feels welcoming and alive, while one without them can feel hollow, as though something essential is missing. What unites them, however, is the way they root daily life. They are the steady points around which routines revolve. When you think back on childhood memories, chances are the local schoolyard, the park, or the corner store features prominently. These are the places that give texture to life, grounding personal histories in the geography of the neighbourhood. Suburbs might often be dismissed as monotonous, but look closely at these anchors and you see remarkable variety. One suburb may have an oval park where cricket matches unfold every weekend, while another has a strip mall dominated by a favourite diner where locals gather over coffee. Each pattern is different, each daily rhythm unique. Together, they reveal that suburbs are not just expanses of roofs and driveways, but places organised around the institutions and spaces that keep everyday life turning smoothly. A home is more than walls. When people imagine suburbia, they often think first of the houses themselves. They are the most visible and personal element of the suburban landscape, each one a microcosm of aspiration, culture and design trends. The styles vary enormously depending on history, region and economy, yet across the world a handful of common forms appear again and again: the bungalow, the semi-detached, the ranch, the townhouse, and more recently the accessory dwelling unit tucked into a backyard. Each of these carries its own rhythms of daily life, shaping how families interact with each other, with neighbours, and with the land around them. The bungalow has perhaps the most romantic aura of all. Single story, often with a low-pitched roof and a generous porch, it first became popular in the early 20th century, especially in North America and parts of the Commonwealth. The bungalow was marketed as modest but stylish, accessible to the growing middle class and suited for climates where outdoor living could merge seamlessly with indoor comfort. In California, the Craftsman bungalow became iconic, with exposed beams and handcrafted details. In India and other colonial settings, the bungalow form adapted from local traditions designed to stay cool in hot weather. Its spread shows how one simple idea, a compact, single-level dwelling, could take on countless regional identities. Across the Atlantic, the semi-detached house emerged as the suburban workhorse in Britain. Two homes built side by side, sharing a common wall, allowed developers to provide affordability while maintaining the prized illusion of independence. Each house had its own front door, its own garden, yet the mirrored layouts revealed the compromise of density. In their uniformity, rows of semis could look repetitive, but inside they offered a balance between private space and neighbourly proximity. Whole generations of British families grew up in semis, their memories tied to narrow staircases, small parlours, and back gardens lined with sheds and vegetable patches. The ranch house, by contrast, sprawled. Born in the wide landscapes of mid-20th century America, the ranch style emphasised horizontality, with long low roofs and open floor plans. Sliding glass doors led onto patios, blending indoor living with outdoor leisure. These houses epitomised the suburban dream after the Second World War. A car in the driveway, a television in the living room, and a backyard barbecue glowing on summer evenings. The ranch was designed for an automobile age, often set back from the street with a large front lawn and a garage that sometimes threatened to outsize the living spaces themselves. Townhouses tell another story, one of density and efficiency. Narrow but tall, often rising 2 or 3 stories, they line up shoulder to shoulder, creating strong street frontages. Popular in Europe, Asia, and increasingly in North American suburbs, they allow more families to live close together while still providing private entrances and small outdoor spaces. For residents, the verticality of a townhouse shapes daily routines: bedrooms stacked above living spaces, staircases as central arteries, and compact backyards that favour container gardens or tiny patios. In recent years, the accessory dwelling unit, sometimes called a granny flat or backyard cottage, has emerged as a quiet but transformative form. These are small secondary homes placed on the same lot as a main house, often converted from garages or built as standalone studios. They serve many purposes: housing for elderly relatives, rental units for extra income, or simply flexible spaces for growing families. Though modest in size, they represent a subtle shift toward increasing density in suburbs without dramatically altering their character. Each of these house types brings with it a certain floor plan logic. Privacy gradients are particularly telling. Public-facing rooms, living rooms, porches or front gardens open toward the street, allowing a certain performance of domestic life. Semi-private zones like kitchens and dining areas occupy the middle, while bedrooms and bathrooms retreat to the back or upper floors, places shielded from outside view. This layering of exposure and seclusion is not accidental but deeply ingrained in architectural design. It reflects human needs for both connection and retreat, for showing the world a tidy front while keeping private life tucked away. The backyard, often overlooked in formal planning discussions, is perhaps the most quintessentially suburban space. It is the personal patch of outdoors where families cultivate gardens, build playsets, or host barbecues. Ecologically, backyards serve as microhabitats. Lawns might be trimmed to within an inch of their lives, but they are also visited by birds, insects, and small mammals. In some regions, suburban backyards form critical corridors for wildlife, linking patches of forest or wetland. Children remember them as kingdoms of imagination, adults as sanctuaries for rest or as endless projects of mowing and maintenance. Inside the house, the floor plan becomes a silent organizer of life. The living room serves as the gathering space. The kitchen as both work zone and social hub. The dining room as a stage for ritual meals. Bedrooms are refuges, often personalized with posters, colors, or collections. Basements, attics, and garages acquire personalities of their own. The basement may become a game room, a laundry cave, or a teenage hideout. The garage, though designed for cars, often transforms into storage space. It's remarkable how many garages evolve into what could only be called storage galaxies, containing everything from bicycles with flat tires to boxes of holiday decorations, all orbiting around the single car that sometimes still squeezes inside. Suburban architecture is also about compromise between uniformity and individuality. Developers often build entire neighborhoods with just a handful of floor plans, rotated or mirrored to create variation. This mass production gives suburbs their recognizable sameness, but residents quickly personalize their homes with paint colors, garden choices, or small renovations. Over time, these changes accumulate, turning cloned houses into unique dwellings with character. A bright red door here, a pergola there, a vegetable patch spilling onto a lawn. Slowly, uniform streets acquire texture and diversity. The evolution of home design reflects wider cultural changes. As families grew smaller, formal dining rooms shrank or vanished. Open-plan living emerged, blending kitchens and lounges into fluid spaces. The rise of home offices brought desks into spare bedrooms or corners of living rooms. Energy efficiency, accessibility, and sustainability have become priorities, influencing window placement, insulation, and solar panel installation. Suburban houses are not static artifacts. They are living designs, adapting to changing needs and technologies. The relationship between the house and the street also reveals suburban values. In older designs, porches invited interaction, offering semi-public stages where people could greet passers-by. In later developments, also, large garages at the front pulled attention inward, making the house face the driveway more than the sidewalk. This shift subtly reduced casual neighborly encounters, replacing porch culture with the private backyard. What seems like a small design decision ripples through the social geography of a neighborhood. Despite their variety, all these suburban homes share one thing. They're shaped not just to shelter people, but to express ideals. The bungalow spoke of modest comfort, the semi of affordability and order, the ranch of spacious leisure, the townhouse of efficient urban living, and the accessory dwelling unit of adaptability. Each is a reflection of the era and society that produced it. Together they form the built vocabulary of suburbia, a language written in brick, timber, and asphalt shingles. The story of suburban homes is, ultimately, about how architecture shapes daily life. From the way families gather in kitchens to the way children play in backyards, from how privacy is protected to how neighbours are encountered, the house is more than shelter. It is an instrument of social geography, setting the stage for everything from morning routines to lifelong memories. Suburban life may appear calm on the surface, but each day it is animated by the steady pulse of movement. Every morning, as the first hints of dawn lighten the sky, windscreens fog with condensation, engines hum to life, and an enormous choreography begins. Cars stream from driveways, buses wind through cul-de-sacs, trains collect passengers at park and ride stations. This tidal flow of commuters is what geographers sometimes call time geography, the study of how human routines stretch across both space and time, weaving invisible patterns that shape the entire suburban landscape. Rush hour is the most obvious expression of this. In the morning, the roads swell with traffic heading toward the city. Red brake lights flicker like beads on a string as cars queue along highways, each one a small capsule of personal routine. Coffee in hand, radio tuned, eyes on the clock. In the evening, the tide reverses. The same streams flow outward, this time illuminated by the red glow of taillights that ripple like a necklace across the dusk. Suburbs expand and contract with these daily rhythms, quiet during the day, buzzing at the margins in the early morning and late afternoon. Not everyone drives from their front door to the office directly. Many commuters use park and ride facilities, a hybrid solution in which drivers leave their cars at large lots near rail or bus stations, continuing the rest of the journey by transit. These nodes create their own geography, clusters of cars filling the lots by sunrise, emptying in the evening, and surrounding businesses timed to profit from the ebb and flow. A bakery near a park and ride can thrive on early morning trade, while a small bar might do brisk business serving tired travellers before they collect their cars. Trip chaining is another subtle pattern, one that often defines suburban routines more than people realise. Instead of one simple journey to work and back, many combine errands into a linked chain. Drop children at school, stop for fuel, continue to work, collect groceries on the way home. The design of suburban roads and the placement of shops reflects this pattern, with supermarkets often strategically located along major routes rather than hidden deep inside neighbourhoods. These chained trips demonstrate how mobility is rarely about a single destination. It is a string of obligations and choices stitched together across the day. The car has long been the primary actor in these routines, but not the only one. Buses ply their routes through suburbs, often meandering in long loops to serve low-density areas. Commuter trains stretch out from city centres, filling with passengers in neat suits or school uniforms. In some suburbs, cycling has gained ground, supported by paths and bike lanes, though in others it remains a rarity. Each mode contributes to the rhythm of movement, and each leaves its mark on the design of infrastructure. Bus stops at regular intervals, train stations with wide parking lots, or bike racks at schools and offices. The reliance on cars, however, has produced a curious paradox known as induced demand. The principle is simple. When roads are widened to reduce congestion, they often end up attracting more drivers, filling back up until they're just as crowded as before. This isn't because engineers are poor at their jobs, but because traffic behaves like a liquid. It flows into any available space. If a new lane opens, people who once travelled at different times took alternative routes, or avoided driving altogether, may now decide the road is easier to use, and so they join in. The short-term relief quickly fades and the cycle begins again. Suburbs, with their dependence on car travel, are especially prone to this phenomenon. Still, commuting is not always about the grind. Many find their own rituals in the process. Some enjoy the solitude of the drive, using it as a pocket of time to listen to music, audiobooks, or podcasts. Train commuters often develop routines of reading the paper, scrolling through phones, or dozing lightly as the landscape blurs past the window. These small comforts turn a necessity into a kind of daily pause between home and work, a liminal space where one life transitions into another. Telework has added a new wrinkle to suburban time geography. Once rare, working from home has grown dramatically in recent decades, accelerated even further by global events. For some, this has meant reclaiming hours once spent in traffic. A spare bedroom becomes an office, a kitchen table, a meeting room. The suburb itself transforms when many residents stay put during the day. Local cafes fill with laptop users, mid-morning dog walkers appear in greater numbers, and traffic flows shift in surprising ways. While not everyone can work remotely, the rise of telework has begun to alter the very definition of a commute, sometimes reducing it to a walk down the hallway. Commuting also influences the social fabric of suburbs. In neighbourhoods with heavy outflows, daytime streets may feel empty with few pedestrians and shuttered homes. Conversely, areas with strong local employment or high levels of telework maintain a steadier hum of life throughout the day. The presence or absence of commuters affects when parks are used, when shops see their busiest hours, and even how safe streets feel. Geography here is not just about distance, but about time, the ebb and flow of presence and absence. For children, commutes shape daily experience too. School runs can be epic affairs of traffic and waiting, or short strolls along leafy sidewalks. Teenagers in car-dependent suburbs often rely on parents for rides until they gain licenses of their own, a rite of passage that unlocks freedom and reshapes family routines. In places with good transit, independence comes sooner, with students hopping on buses or trains with ease. These small details add up to very different childhood geographies, depending on how movement is structured. It is easy to take these daily flows for granted because they feel so ordinary. Yet they are the circulatory system of suburbia, moving people and resources in predictable but powerful rhythms. From the moment the first windscreen wipers sweep away dew at dawn, to the glow of red beads stretching along evening highways, commutes sketch patterns across the land that repeat day after day. They tell us not only where people live and work, but how they connect those two worlds, and how much time is spent in the in-between. Movement writes the map, but rules hold the pen. If you were to look at a suburb from above, what you would see is not just houses and gardens, but an intricate puzzle of blocks, lots, and streets. These patterns, drawn like lines on graph paper or curves in flowing ink, dictate how people move, how neighbours meet, and how the entire community functions. They may look like simple geometry, but each choice of length, angle, or curve carries profound consequences for daily life. Blocks are the basic units of this geometry. In older city neighbourhoods, blocks tend to be short and narrow, encouraging walking by the multiplying intersections and choices of route. In many suburbs, however, blocks grew longer, sometimes stretching for hundreds of metres before offering a cross street. The result is fewer options for pedestrians and cyclists, but also calmer traffic, as cars travel smoothly along uninterrupted stretches. Short blocks buzz with activity, long blocks lull with quiet. The length of a block is not just a measure on a map, it is a determinant of how streets feel underfoot. Connectivity is another measure planners use to describe these networks. A neighbourhood with high connectivity has many intersections and multiple paths to reach a destination. Imagine a grid. If one street is blocked, another parallel street provides an alternative. A suburb with low connectivity dominated by looping roads and cul-de-sacs forces travellers onto a limited number of routes. Cars funnel onto collectors and arterials, often causing congestion. Pedestrians and cyclists may find themselves at dead ends, needing to travel long detours to reach a school or shop that is only a short distance away as the crow flies. Connectivity indices, sometimes calculated as ratios of links to nodes, reveal these patterns mathematically, but you can feel them intuitively just by walking a few blocks. The cul-de-sac embodies the suburban preference for quiet and seclusion. With no through traffic, it offers safety for children playing, privacy for households, and reduced noise. Its rounded head creates a sense of enclosure, almost like a miniature village green. Yet this comes at a cost. Cul-de-sacs fracture the network, forcing longer trips for everyone. A neighbour living directly behind your house may be only 30 metres away, yet the street layout might demand a drive of several minutes to actually reach them. From the air, cul-de-sacs resemble bubbles connected by narrow stems to larger arteries, a pattern charming to some, frustrating to others. Grids, by contrast, are the ancient and enduring form. Straight streets intersecting at right angles create predictability, ease of navigation, and multiple routes. They are efficient for utilities, for mail delivery, and for foot traffic. But they can also feel monotonous, a relentless repetition of blocks with little relief. In hot or windy climates, grids may also expose walkers to long stretches without shelter. Urban designers often sought a middle ground, blending curving streets with occasional cut-through paths, trying to soften the rigidity of the grid without surrendering entirely to the maze of cul-de-sacs. Permeability paths are one clever solution. These are small pedestrian connections, often narrow alleys or landscaped walkways, that link dead ends to nearby streets or parks. To the untrained eye, they may look like little more than footpaths between fences, but they significantly improve access for walkers and cyclists. A child on foot can slip through in moments, while cars must still follow the long official road. These permeability shortcuts bring back some of the flexibility lost when street networks favour vehicles over pedestrians. Even the curves of corners reveal the priorities of design. Engineers calculate corner radii, the measure of how sharp or gentle a turn is. Larger radii allow cars, particularly larger vehicles like fire trucks, to turn smoothly at speed. Smaller radii, however, slow traffic and shorten crossing distances for pedestrians. In many mid-20th century suburbs, corner radii widened, prioritising vehicle flow. More recently, some planners have begun tightening them again, rediscovering the benefits of slowing cars and making intersections friendlier for people on foot. The difference might be only a few metres of concrete, but it changes the character of a whole neighbourhood crossing. The lot, smaller than a block but no less important, determines how houses sit within this geometry. Narrow lots produce tightly knit rows of homes, while wide lots encourage generous spacing and sprawling front lawns. Deep lots may hide large backyards, while shallow ones compress outdoor space to the sides. These dimensions shape not just architecture, but also community. Narrow, shallow lots can foster casual interaction as neighbours naturally encounter each other near the street. Wide, deep lots stretch the distance, encouraging privacy, but sometimes at the expense of sociability. When you trace all of this from above, the suburban plan takes on an almost artistic quality. Imagine sketching it out. A winding collector road arcing like a ribbon, cul-de-sacs branching like leaves from a stem, larger arterials forming the frame, and parks or schools nestled in central nodes. Utility corridors cut their own straight lines across the curves, while driveways punctuate the rhythm along each block. It is a diagram that is at once abstract and deeply human, blending geometry with lived experience. The differences between patterns are not just aesthetic but practical. A grid might allow a pizza delivery to find your door in minutes, while a curvilinear maze could leave them circling. Emergency services prefer high connectivity for speed, while residents may prefer seclusion for quiet. Retailers often favour street patterns that deliver high visibility and easy car access, while children might long for permeability paths that let them walk to school without a car. Every preference leaves its imprint on the lines that shape the land. Over time, these patterns age and evolve. Some cul-de-sacs have been pierced with new walkways to improve access. Grids have been softened with the traffic calming measures to reduce speeding. Even the geometry of blocks changes subtly as houses are rebuilt, extensions are added, and driveways widened. What once looked uniform on a planning map slowly gains wrinkles and variations, the traces of decades of daily life. The suburban street plan, then, is more than a backdrop. It is the skeleton that determines how everything else fits together. The flow of cars, the paths of pedestrians, the placement of schools and shops, even the feel of community. Look down from an aerial view, and you see more than lines on a page. You see a hidden script, one that has guided millions of lives without them even realizing it. Listen, suburbs have soundscapes too. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine not what a suburb looks like, but what it sounds like. Geography is often thought of in terms of maps, distances and boundaries, but the soundscape tells its own story. Suburbs hum, whisper, and occasionally roar, their acoustic patterns as revealing as their street layouts or housing styles. To walk through one with your ears open is to notice a unique mixture of human-made and natural noises, carefully filtered by distance as design and time of day. At dawn, the first notes of the suburban day are often natural. Birds begin before the alarm clocks do, each species adding its own phrase. Blackbirds sing from chimneys, sparrows chatter in hedges, and in warmer regions, cicadas trill as the air warms. The chorus rises and falls with the seasons, sometimes joined by the faint scraping of a sprinkler, kicking on or the metallic click of a neighbour's gate. This gentle overture contrasts with the later swell of human activity. As morning deepens, cars join the orchestra, engines start, garage doors rattle open, and tyres crunch softly on driveways. One by one, vehicles merge onto the arterial roads, their collective noise blending into the distant drone of a highway. For many residents, that faint roar is the suburban equivalent of waves at the seashore. Constant, background, both intrusive and oddly soothing. From a distance, a motorway becomes not a series of honks and rumbles, but a steady, low-frequency wash of sound. The daytime suburban soundscape is dominated by maintenance. Leaf blowers, in particular, are the suburban soundtrack of autumn, their whining persistence capable of carrying for blocks. Lawnmowers provide the baseline in spring and summer, joined by hedge trimmers and the occasional bark of a dog supervising the process. These sounds may irritate or comfort, depending on one's perspective, but they are part of the cyclical care that keeps yards neat and streets tidy. Even recycling trucks add their metallic clang to the routine, punctuating the calm with a mechanical crash before moving on. Yet silence is also a defining suburban sound. Midday, when commuters are away and children at school, neighbourhoods often grow quiet enough that you can hear wind rustling through trees or the distant buzz of an insect. In some suburbs, the absence of human noise during these hours is striking. A calm lull that settles over the streets. The geometry of cul-de-sacs and long blocks amplifies this effect. With fewer cars passing through, acoustic interruptions diminish, leaving space for softer details to emerge. In the evening, the suburban soundscape takes on a layered richness. Trains passing at the edge of town sigh as they decelerate into stations, their horns long and melancholy. Crickets strike up their nightly chorus in gardens and vacant lots. Screen doors slap shut as families step out for evening walks. Children's laughter drifts from playgrounds or backyards, gradually fading as darkness falls. These sounds are often carried by design. Open backyards and fences allow noises to mingle, while wide setbacks and double-glazed windows filter and soften them indoors. Architecture and planning shape the way suburbs sound. Houses set back from the road reduce the volume of passing cars. Trees and hedges along verges absorb and scatter high frequencies, giving some streets a muffled calm. Cul-de-sacs reduce through traffic so the prevailing noises are local, a basketball bouncing on a driveway, a conversation drifting across lawns, the squeak of a swing. Grids, on the other hand, allow a steadier stream of vehicles, their noise bleeding through more consistently. In this sense, a suburb's soundscape is partly a product of its geometry. One of the most distinctive features of suburban sound is its rhythm of peaks and troughs. Unlike the constant din of a city centre or the near silence of rural landscapes, suburbs fluctuate. They are loud in the mornings and evenings, hushed at midday, and filled with different noises depending on the season. Snowplows scraping in winter, barbecues sizzling in summer, children shouting during school holidays. Each adds to the cyclical pattern. It is a geography of time as much as space. Technology has altered these rhythms. Air conditioning units provide a steady hum through hot nights in some regions, while routers blink silently, their signals inaudible but marking a new era of domestic soundlessness. Inside, dishwashers swish, televisions murmur, and washing machines thrum. Suburban soundscapes extend through walls as much as across fences, with modern insulation blurring the edges between indoors and outdoors. Even Suburbs itself is managed, designed into homes with thicker windows and softer materials. There is humour in these everyday noises. The ritualistic competition of lawn care can turn weekends into informal sound festivals. One mower starts, then another responds, followed by a chorus of blowers, as if the entire neighbourhood has conspired to synchronise yard work. Dogs often seem to take part as well, barking in sequence, passing along messages that only they truly understand. What might appear as random interruption is, in its way, a communal rhythm linking households through sound. Night brings its own character. The hush deepens, punctuated by the steady chirp of crickets or the distant hoot of an owl. A late train sighs across the horizon, its horn echoing through quiet streets. Sometimes the far-off throb of a nightclub or stadium drifts faintly across the suburbs, carried by wind, reminding residents of the city beyond. More often, though, the dominant notes are domestic and small. The muffled laughter of a late conversation on a back deck, the creak of a gate in the breeze, the steady tap of rain dripping into gutters. These layers of sound create a kind of acoustic fingerprint for each neighbourhood. No two suburbs sound exactly alike, yet all share this mixture of human and natural, of routine and surprise. They remind us that geography is never just about what we see, it is also about what we hear. The suburb speaks in murmurs, in drones, in whispers carried by air and shaped by design. Life finds edges comfortable. Suburbs are often pictured as landscapes dominated by houses, driveways and carefully trimmed lawns, but they are also vibrant ecological mosaics. Between the fences and beneath the trees, a surprising diversity of life persists, adapts, and in some cases thrives. The suburban environment may not have the untouched wildness of forests or wetlands, yet it offers its own patchwork of habitats, corridors, and microclimates. To understand suburbs fully, you need to look not just at the human geography, but also at the life that rustles in the hedges, sings from the trees, and creeps across backyards under cover of night. One of the most visible ecological features of suburbs is the tree canopy. Street trees and backyard plantings do more than provide shade on hot afternoons. They lower air temperatures through transpiration, reduce energy costs for cooling, and filter pollutants from the air. A well-established canopy even dampens noise, softening the mechanical hum of traffic into something more distant and bearable. In storm events, trees intercept rainfall, slowing its path into gutters and drains, helping to reduce flash flooding. Cities often measure canopy cover as a percentage of land area, and suburbs with abundant mature trees score highly. They are not just attractive, they are infrastructure, performing quiet work that benefits both humans and wildlife. Lawns, by contrast, have an ecological reputation that is more complicated. They dominate suburban yards across much of the world, Vast fields of grass clipped short and maintained with watering, fertilizer and effort. Ecologically speaking, lawns are very short prairies with big ambitions. They provide limited habitat and consume enormous resources to stay green. Yet they are beloved for their versatility. Spaces for children to play, for dogs to roam, for barbecues to sprawl. Recently, there has been a slow shift toward alternatives. Pollinator-friendly plantings, wild flower meadows, or native grasses that demand less water. These trends reveal a growing awareness that a yard can be both beautiful and ecologically generous. Pollinator strips are one way suburbs are reimagining their green spaces. By planting corridors of wildflowers along verges, medians, or even in small backyard beds, communities create highways for bees, butterflies and other insects. These strips stitch together fragmented habitats, allowing pollinators to move more easily through built landscapes. In Europe, roadside verges are increasingly managed as wildflower reserves. In North America, front lawns sometimes give way to milkweed patches to support monarch butterflies. In Australia, native flowering plants provide nectar for birds and insects alike. These modest interventions demonstrate that even small suburban plots can carry ecological weight when managed thoughtfully. Wildlife corridors are another crucial element of suburban ecology. Animals, unlike humans, do not recognize zoning laws or property lines. They move through the landscape seeking food, water, shelter, and mates. Suburbs that provide connected corridors of greenery allow species to pass safely from one area to another. Streams lined with trees, utility easements left as meadows, or continuous back fences softened by vegetation can all serve this function. In some regions, innovative solutions have emerged. In the United Kingdom, garden fences are sometimes built with hedgehog highways, small holes that let hedgehogs pass from yard to yard, ensuring they can forage across a larger area. In parts of Australia, frog fences guide amphibians away from roads and towards safe underpasses, reducing roadkill and maintaining populations. These small adjustments can make a surprising difference in the survival of species within suburban landscapes. Stormwater management links ecology directly with engineering. Traditional suburbs often channeled rain rapidly into underground pipes, whisking it away but also increasing flood risk downstream. Modern approaches try to slow and absorb water where it falls. Rain gardens, swales and permeable pavements reduce runoff while creating microhabitats for plants and insects. Suburbs that integrate such green infrastructure blur the line between ecology and utility, treating stormwater not as a nuisance but as a resource. A stretch of curb planted with grasses and flowers may seem decorative, but it is also filtering pollutants and sheltering butterflies. Birds are perhaps the most visible suburban wildlife. Some species adapt remarkably well to the patchwork of trees, lawns and feeder species. Sparrows, surleal and pigeon thrive in nearly every suburb on Earth. Others, like robins, magpies or honey-eaters, add regional flavour to the daily chorus. For many residents, birdwatching becomes an accessible hobby without leaving home, binoculars in hand on a back porch. Yet suburban birds are also indicators. Their presence or absence reveals much about the health of local habitats. Diversity of songbirds suggests a varied and rich ecology. The dominance of only a few aggressive species can signal ecological imbalance. Mammals weave their own quiet paths through suburbia. Foxes, raccoons, possums, or even deer slip between yards and green belts, often unnoticed until they raid trash bins or appear in headlights. These animals adapt quickly, taking advantage of food sources and shelter in ways humans sometimes find inconvenient. Yet their persistence is a reminder that suburbs are not purely human domains. They are shared landscapes, contested and negotiated daily between people and other species. The backyard garden plays an important role in this ecology. Beyond its use for vegetables or ornamentals, it becomes a micro-ecosystem in its own right. Compost heaps attract insects, which in turn attract birds. Ponds or water features provide breeding sites for amphibians. Fruit trees offer both human harvests and animal forage. Even the humble shed can serve as a roost for bats or owls. Each household's choices ripple outward into the larger web of suburban life, collectively shaping the biodiversity of entire neighbourhoods. Ecological benefits extend to human well-being. Tree-lined streets reduce stress levels, gardens provide opportunities for physical activity, and encounters with wildlife can spark wonder. Children who grow up seeing butterflies and frogs in their yards carry those impressions for life, influencing how they value the natural world. Suburban ecology, therefore, is not only about sustaining non-human species, but also about cultivating a healthier relationship between people and their environment. The challenge is balance. Suburbs consume land that once supported larger ecosystems, fragmenting habitats and placing pressure on species that cannot adapt. Yet within their bounds, they can also offer surprising refuges, especially when designed or managed with ecology in mind. Every decision, from what to plant in a garden to how to design a drainage channel, either narrows or widens the possibilities for suburban life beyond human residence. Looked at this way, a suburb is more than streets and houses. It is a layered environment where people and wildlife cohabitate, sometimes comfortably, sometimes in tension. Its ecology is shaped by the quiet work of trees, the ambitions of lawns, the ingenuity of pollinator strips, and the invisible passages of hedgehogs and frogs. Life persists, adapts, and occasionally flourishes, even in places built primarily for human convenience. Suburban life has always revolved around more than just homes and schools. The places where people shop, gather, and casually cross paths are just as central to the rhythm of daily living. Retail is the connective tissue of suburbia, providing not only the goods people need, but also shaping how neighbourhoods feel and function. Over the last century, the suburban shopping landscape has shifted dramatically, evolving from corner stores to strip malls, from vast enclosed shopping centres to carefully designed lifestyle complexes, and now to redevelop spaces that blend commerce with housing and leisure. Each stage of this retail journey has left its mark on suburban geography. The earliest suburban shops clustered along main streets near rail and tram stops, modest in scale and built for walking. A bakery, a butcher, a newsagent, perhaps a tailor. These businesses served local catchments and were stitched tightly into the daily routines of residents. With the rise of the automobile, however, retail began to spread outward, reshaping itself around car access. Thus emerged the strip mall, a long row of shops fronted by a wide parking lot. The strip mall was efficient, flexible, and often inexpensive to build. It concentrated services in one place where drivers could stop, park, and quickly run errands. For all their practicality, strip malls were not exactly known for beauty. A collection of flat-roofed boxes sitting behind seas of asphalt may have lacked charm, but they offered something compelling: convenience. Banks, pizzerias, laundromats, and pharmacies all sat side by side, ready to serve households darting in and out between commutes and school runs. Their very plainness made them adaptable, and so they multiplied across suburban landscapes, becoming an almost universal feature. As suburbs grew larger, the strip mall expanded into something grander: the power centre. These were collections of big box retailers, vast single-storey stores selling furniture, electronics, or hardware. Here, the parking lot grew even bigger, sometimes dwarfing the buildings themselves. Shoppers could buy a sofa, a television, and groceries, all within the same complex, loading their cars and driving away with ease. The scale reflected the scale of the automobile era. Vast stores serving vast distances. Then came the golden age of the shopping mall. Beginning in the mid-20th century, malls offered more than just retail. They created entire indoor worlds. Air conditioning, artificial lighting, polished floors, and background music combined to make malls destinations in themselves. For many suburban teenagers, the mall was a rite of passage, a place to meet friends, wander in groups, and taste independence. Families came on weekends to shop, eat, and linger. In winter climates, the mall was an enclosed refuge. In hot regions, a cool escape. Malls were not just commercial centres, but social ones. Private spaces masquerading as public squares. Their design mirrored civic ambitions. Anchored by the department stores at each end, connected by corridors of smaller shops and dotted with fountains or food courts, malls created controlled environments where everything from lighting to scent was orchestrated to encourage staying and spending. They became symbols of suburban prosperity, and in many towns, they were the closest thing to a town square. Yet behind their glamour, they relied on the same basic principle as strip malls: abundant parking. Ratios of spaces to square footage became critical calculations, ensuring that every shopper could arrive and leave by car. Over time, however, malls began to decline. Department stores lost dominance, online shopping rose, and many once thriving complexes fell into disuse. Empty corridors echoed with footsteps, neon signs flickered out, and the vast asphalt plains stood half empty. These dead malls became almost haunting, relics of an era when retail was the beating heart of suburbia. Yet decline also brought opportunity. Developers began retrofitting them into mixed-use hubs, adding apartments, offices, medical centres, or even schools into the shells of former shopping spaces. Parking lots transformed into plazas, with trees and fountains, replacing seas of asphalt with places designed for strolling and gathering. Parallel to this decline rose the lifestyle centre, a 21st century reinvention of the suburban shopping experience. Instead of enclosed corridors, lifestyle centres embraced open-air layouts designed to feel like traditional main streets. Buildings faced inward towards plazas, fountains, or pedestrian promenades, often with apartments above shops. Restaurants spilled out onto patios, and carefully curated architecture aimed to give an impression of timelessness, even if the entire complex had been built in one coordinated swoop just a few years earlier. These places were not only about shopping, but also about atmosphere, creating curated experiences that combined retail with leisure and dining. The return to Main Street aesthetics reflected a growing suburban desire for placemaking. People craved spaces where walking felt pleasant, where sitting on a bench did not mean staring across an ocean of parking stalls. By integrating public squares, landscaping, and even performance spaces, lifestyle centres blurred the line between commerce and community. They borrowed from the language of urban design, while still firmly rooted in the suburban logic of accessibility and car parking. All of these retail forms, from strip malls to lifestyle centres, highlight the importance of parking ratios. Behind the design of every shopping complex lies a simple equation: how many parking spaces are required per 1,000 square feet of retail? These ratios dictate not only the size of lots, but also the very shape of the buildings. Too few spaces and customers might turn away. Too many and the lot becomes a lifeless void. This balance has quietly structured suburban shopping landscapes for decades, ensuring that asphalt often covers more land than the stores themselves. At night, the sound and sight of these spaces change. Neon signs glow against the darkness, their reflections shimmering on wet asphalt after rain. The roar of traffic subsides, leaving a few cars scattered under bright lamps. Malls and strip centres bustling by day take on a strange stillness after closing, their vast parking lots echoing with emptiness. In contrast, newer mixed-use centres often remain lively after hours, with restaurants and apartments keeping activity going into the night. These differences reveal how design choices ripple into daily rhythms, shaping whether a place feels vibrant or deserted once the shops shut their doors. The evolution of suburban retail is not just a tale of commerce, it is a story of placemaking. Each generation of designers attempted to balance efficiency with atmosphere, practicality with community. Strip malls provided the basics, power centres maximised scale, malls offered spectacle, and lifestyle centres tried to recreate a sense of civic life. And now, as old malls are repurposed and new developments experiment with blending uses, suburbs continue to adapt, searching for ways to anchor communities not just with transactions but with shared experiences. Suburbs are sometimes spoken of as if they were a single idea, a universal zone of lawns, driveways and shopping centres. Yet the reality is far more diverse. Suburbs take on remarkably different shapes depending on history, culture, policy and geography. What feels normal in one country can appear unusual or even unrecognisable in another. The edge of the city, it turns out, is a canvas where societies paint their values, and the resulting portraits vary from place to place. In the United Kingdom, one of the defining features of suburban geography is the Green Belt. Established in the mid-20th century, these are protected rings of countryside surrounding major cities, designed to prevent uncontrolled sprawl and preserve open land. Within the Green Belt, development is tightly restricted, forcing suburbs to grow more densely within the urban side of the ring. The result is a patchwork of commuter towns and villages pressed against these invisible boundaries. Living just inside the belt often means a short train ride into London, Birmingham or Manchester, while beyond it farmland stretches undisturbed. The Green Belt has been praised for preserving rural character, yet criticised for inflating housing costs and encouraging leapfrog development further afield. Either way, it shapes the suburban experience in the United Kingdom into one of sharp contrasts. Dense housing estates abutting expanses of protected countryside. Japan offers a strikingly different picture. Here, rail has been the dominant shaper of suburban growth for more than a century. Around Tokyo, Osaka and other metropolitan areas, private railway companies not only built lines but also developed entire suburbs along them. Stations became nodes of commerce, surrounded by clusters of shops, schools and apartments. Walkability is high, with homes, businesses and daily services tightly packed within easy reach of platforms. The result is a kind of suburb that feels almost urban in density, yet functions as an edge to the city. A typical Japanese suburban house might have a small footprint and compact garden, but residents enjoy access to frequent trains that whisk them into the city centre in minutes. Unlike the car-oriented suburbs of North America, the Japanese model demonstrates how rail can anchor suburban life, producing environments where people rely less on automobiles and more on transit and walking. Continental Europe offers still another variation. Around cities like Paris, Madrid and Milan, suburbs blend into peri-urban villages that have gradually expanded outward. These settlements often combine historic cores with newer developments, creating an unusual layering of time and form. A medieval church may stand at the centre of a village now surrounded by modern apartment blocks or industrial estates. Density profiles tend to be higher than in Anglo-American suburbs, with more multifamily housing and less emphasis on detached single-family homes. Public transport networks, often extensive, tie these communities into metropolitan regions while the farmland and vineyards persist just beyond their limits. The European suburb is less about endless tracts of identical houses and more about a spectrum of densities, where townhouses, small apartment blocks, and detached homes coexist. Southern Europe adds yet another texture. Around Athens or Naples, suburban growth has often taken the form of informal or semi-formal expansion, with houses built incrementally by families on plots subdivided over time. Here, regulations sometimes follow development rather than leading it. The result is a patchwork of styles, sizes and densities united less by uniform zoning than by shared rhythms of family life and social networks. Streets may be narrow and winding, public spaces improvised, but the communities are lively, reflecting a more flexible relationship between planning and lived reality. In the global south, the suburban edge is frequently marked by informality. Around megacities like Sao Paulo, Lagos or Mumbai, sprawling neighbourhoods emerge faster than formal planning can keep up. These areas are not suburbs in the conventional sense of detached houses and cul-de-sacs, but they are still edges of urban expansion. Families build homes with whatever materials are available, adding rooms as resources allow. Roads, sewers and power networks often arrive later, after communities have already established themselves. These informal suburbs, sometimes called peri-urban settlements, challenge conventional definitions but are essential to understanding global urbanization. They reveal how the edge of the city is both a place of aspiration and struggle, where access to opportunity is balanced against insecurity and risk. Latin America illustrates another hybrid model. Many cities there have both wealthy gated suburbs, complete with golf courses and private security, and vast informal settlements just beyond. The contrasts are stark. Luxury villas with swimming pools sharing borders with self-built neighbourhoods of concrete block homes. Both, however, are forms of suburban expansion, responding to different economic realities. Together they highlight how suburbia can embody inequality as much as comfort, a reminder that the word suburb does not automatically mean uniform affluence. In Africa, suburbanization has taken on unique forms shaped by rapid urban growth and diverse cultural traditions. Around Nairobi, for example, satellite towns have developed along major highways, mixing formal developments with informal sprawl. In South Africa, suburban patterns still reflect the legacy of apartheid, with spatial divisions shaping who lives where and under what conditions. In many places, suburban land is a contested frontier, where agricultural uses, conservation zones and new housing all vie for space. Australia presents yet another variant. There, suburbs often stretch far into the landscape with detached houses on relatively large plots dominating. The quarter-acre block was once the suburban dream, symbolising independence and space. Cities like Sydney and Melbourne expanded outward in waves of such housing, later tempered by higher density developments along rail corridors. Australian suburbs are notable for their blending of indoor and outdoor life, with verandas, barbecues and gardens forming central features of the home. At the same time, their low densities create challenges for transport and sustainability, echoing debates familiar in North America. Even within the United States, suburban forms are not monolithic. The Levitt towns of the post-war era, with their mass-produced houses and rigid layouts, differ from the more recent edge cities of office parks, shopping complexes, and cul-de-sac housing. Sunbelt suburbs, sprawling under bright skies, contrast with older rail-linked suburbs in the northeast or midwest. Each wave of development reveals shifting cultural priorities, from home ownership for returning veterans to car-centric expansion to mixed-use redevelopment in recent decades. The American suburb is both stereotype and reality, endlessly diverse across its vast geography. Looking at these global variations side by side reveals a useful truth. Suburbs are not one thing but many. They can be compact, walkable, and rail-oriented, as in Japan. They can be tightly constrained by planning rules, as in Britain. They can be layered with centuries of history, as in Europe. They can be sprawling, informal, and improvised, as in much of the global south. What unites them is not their appearance, but their function. They are the transitional landscapes where cities meet countryside, where growth pushes outward, and where societies express their visions of comfort, opportunity, and belonging. Seen from above, the density profiles of these suburbs look very different. Some taper gradually from urban centres to rural land like gentle slopes. Others show sharp breaks, dense cities meeting farmland with only a thin line of suburbs in between. Some spread in star-like patterns along transit corridors, while others form patchy mosaics depending on land ownership and policy. These profiles are like fingerprints unique to each place, yet all recognisable as the marks of human expansion at the urban edge. Suburbs are more than houses and streets. They are lived environments where culture, community and solitude weave together in complicated ways. The edge of the city is a place where people come seeking privacy and calm, yet it is also where neighbours gather for sports, worship and club meetings. Suburbs are at once sociable and isolating, offering both the promise of belonging and the comfort of retreat. How those forces balance depends on the spaces and institutions that give shape to social life. Clubs have long been a cornerstone of suburban community. From Rotary clubs to gardening societies, from chess groups to amateur dramatics, these organisations create networks of participation that stitch people together. Many suburbs sprouted tennis clubs, golf courses, or swimming pools as part of their original developments, not just as leisure amenities but as selling points for prospective buyers. Joining such clubs often became a rite of passage, a way to integrate into local life. The facilities provided recreation, but the real function was social, meeting neighbours, building friendships, and forming a sense of place. Faith centres have also anchored suburban communities. Churches, mosques, synagogues and temples often serve as both spiritual and social hubs. They provide spaces not only for worship but also for community meals, charity drives, youth programs and cultural festivals. In many suburbs, the skyline is punctuated not by skyscrapers but by the spire of a church or the dome of a mosque. Faith communities often sustain traditions and social bonds that extend well beyond their religious function, giving suburbs a rhythm of gatherings that echo across generations. Sports pitches and playing fields form another layer of community geography. Weekend mornings see waves of children in brightly coloured uniforms running across suburban soccer fields or baseball diamonds. Parents line the sidelines with thermoses of coffee, shouting encouragement or advice. These spaces act as meeting grounds where families mingle, friendships form and local identities grow. For teenagers, suburban sports clubs can be central to social life, while for adults, recreational leagues provide not just exercise but camaraderie. A suburban park filled with the sounds of whistles, cheers and bouncing balls is a portrait of community in motion. Yet community is not limited to formal institutions. Sociologists often speak of third places, locations that are neither home nor workplace but somewhere in between. In suburbs, these can range from coffee shops to libraries, from community centres to hair salons. A cafe might be the spot where regulars greet each other daily, while a library hosts story hours, lectures or quiet study sessions. These third places are subtle but essential. They allow casual encounters, strengthen social ties, and keep the social fabric from thinning. Without them, life on the edge can feel disconnected, a scattering of private islands behind closed doors. Still, suburbs are marked by a paradox. They promise both community and solitude, and the boundary between the two can be delicate. Houses are often set apart by lawns, hedges or fences, offering privacy and space. This separation can be comforting, a sense of refuge from the intensity of urban life. Yet it can also slip into isolation, where neighbours remain strangers and social ties fray. Suburbs, in this sense, are experiments in balancing distance and proximity. The rituals of suburban sociability often reveal this balance. Think of the casual waves exchanged across driveways or sidewalks, the quick greetings delivered without leaving the safety of one's yard. Some call this wave-by mailbox diplomacy, a polite acknowledgement that maintains friendliness while respecting boundaries. It is warm enough to prevent alienation, yet reserved enough to preserve privacy. These micro-interactions, repeated daily, become the glue of suburban civility. The architecture of houses also influences the degree of community or solitude. Older designs with front porches encouraged interaction as people sat outside and spoke with passers-by. Later suburban houses, dominated by large garages and backyard decks, turned social life inward, away from the street. This shift reshaped how neighbours met, less over the garden fence, more at organised events or indoor gatherings. The built form in this way acts as a silent mediator of social behaviour. Diversity adds further layers to suburban culture. In some places, suburbs are remarkably homogeneous, with residents sharing similar incomes, ethnicities and lifestyles. In others, they are melting pots where immigrant communities carve out distinct spaces, bringing with them languages, cuisines and traditions. The suburban edge can host both enclaves of cultural continuity and zones of mixing, where different groups meet in schools, shops and workplaces. Food is often the bridge, with suburban streets lined by the restaurants, offering everything from kebabs to sushi to tacos, reflecting the global character of contemporary suburban life. Community festivals bring these threads together. Whether it is 4th of July parade in the United States, Diwali lights in a British suburb, or cherry blossom festivals in Japan, suburban neighbourhoods often organise annual celebrations that provide moments of collective joy. Streets close to traffic, parks fill with music and stalls, and residents step out of their private spheres to share food, dance and laughter. These moments reveal the social heartbeat of suburbs, often hidden beneath everyday routines. Of course, not everyone participates equally. For some, suburbs can feel lonely, particularly for those without strong ties to schools, clubs or religious groups. Long commutes may leave little time for community involvement. The design of low-density neighbourhoods can make casual encounters rare, and social isolation has become a recognised challenge in some suburban regions. The very features that promise peace, distance, privacy and quiet can in excess become barriers to connection. Technology has added a new dimension to suburban social life. Neighbourhood message boards, online groups and social media have created virtual versions of third places. Residents share information about lost pets, local events or crime alerts with the click of a button. These platforms extend community ties beyond physical spaces, though they can sometimes amplify divisions as much as solidarity. The blend of digital and physical geographies shapes suburban culture in ways earlier generations could hardly have imagined. Ultimately, the culture of suburbs lies in this tension between togetherness and retreat. They are places where families carve out private havens, but also where collective institutions, clubs, faith centres, sports fields and third places keep the threads of society woven. A suburb can be quiet enough to hear only the wind in the trees, yet busy enough that on Saturday mornings the local soccer pitches resound with cheers. It can be lonely, or it can be welcoming, depending on how its residents engage with the spaces provided. Suburbs are often thought of as havens of comfort, leafy streets, cool breezes, and quiet homes tucked away from the heat and bustle of the city. Yet the suburban form comes with its own climate story, one shaped by energy use, building design, and the subtle but powerful effects of asphalt, lawns, and trees. How comfortable a suburb feels, and how sustainable it is in the long run, depends on an intricate balance between natural systems and built environments. One of the clearest environmental challenges for suburbs is the urban heat island effect. Paved surfaces such as roads, parking lots, and rooftops absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night, raising local temperatures several degrees above surrounding countryside. Even low-rise suburban areas are not immune. Large asphalt driveways and broad cul-de-sacs act like heat sponges, while dark shingle roofs soak in sunlight. On a summer evening, you can feel the difference by stepping from a shaded park into a street lined with cars. The air suddenly warmer, heavier, and less forgiving. Trees, of course, are the antidote. A mature canopy transforms the thermal comfort of a street. Shade lowers surface temperatures dramatically, while transpiration, the process of leaves releasing water vapor, cools the air like natural air conditioning. Neighborhoods with generous tree cover are often several degrees cooler in summer than those stripped bare. The presence of trees also reduces energy use inside homes, cutting down on the need for constant air conditioning. A single large tree shading a house can save significant amounts of electricity each year, a small but powerful reminder of how ecology and energy are intertwined. Building efficiency is another layer of the climate story. Many suburban houses were built in eras when energy was cheap and abundant, and insulation standards were minimal. Drafty windows, poorly insulated attics, and inefficient heating and cooling systems still characterize vast swathes of suburban housing stock. Retrofitting these homes, adding insulation, replacing windows, upgrading to efficient appliances offers enormous potential to reduce energy consumption. Some suburbs have embraced solar panels on rooftops, turning once passive houses into small-scale power producers. Others experiment with heat pumps, community energy grids, and designs that capture breezes naturally. On summer nights, opening windows to evening breezes rather than running an air conditioner can make a house feel alive, connected to its climate instead of sealed against it. Travel emissions complicate the suburban climate balance. Detached houses on quiet streets may feel idyllic, but the reliance on cars to reach jobs, schools and shops produces significant carbon footprints. Transportation is often the largest single source of emissions in suburban areas, outweighing even household energy use. Long commutes, stop-and-go traffic and errand chains stitched together by car journeys all add up. A single family may live in an energy-efficient home with solar panels, yet their daily car travel erodes much of that progress. This paradox reveals how climate performance is not just about buildings, but about entire patterns of settlement. Suburban retrofits are slowly emerging to meet these challenges. Some communities plant trees systematically along streets, aiming to expand canopy cover over decades. Others introduce bike lanes, bus routes, or electric vehicle charging stations to reduce transport emissions. Developers experiment with permeable pavements that absorb rain and reflect heat rather than trap it. Even small interventions matter: painting roofs in lighter colours, installing reflective asphalt, or clustering services closer to homes. These measures do not remake the suburb overnight, but they gradually tune its form to respond better to climate realities. Heat islands and energy inefficiency are not the only environmental factors. Suburbs also contend with seasonal extremes. In colder climates, heating dominates energy bills, and the spread-out nature of suburban neighbourhoods makes district heating or efficient transit difficult to provide. In hotter climates, cooling becomes the burden, straining power grids during heat waves. Suburbs on the edge of deserts, such as those in the American Southwest, reveal the contradictions starkly. Lush lawns watered daily in places where rainfall is scarce, air conditioners humming constantly to battle the relentless sun. Comfort is achieved, but at significant ecological and energy cost. The good news is that suburbs hold potential for adaptation. Their lower densities mean more room for tree planting, rain gardens, solar installations, and other ecological improvements. Houses with backyards can support composting, vegetable gardens, or even small-scale water capture systems. Neighbourhood associations can encourage collective action, planting trees together, sharing tools, or investing in community-scale renewable projects. Unlike dense urban centres where space is scarce, suburbs offer flexibility if the will is there. Culture also plays a role. For decades, suburban identity was tied to the image of the green lawn, an emblem of prosperity and order. Lawns, however, require immense amounts of water and energy to maintain, particularly in arid regions. Slowly, alternative aesthetics are gaining ground. xeriscaping with drought-tolerant plants, prairie gardens, or native vegetation that thrives without constant irrigation. These shifts reveal how climate consciousness can seep into even the smallest choices, turning status symbols into ecological statements. Energy transitions ripple through suburbs in other ways too, as electric cars become more common, garages double as fueling stations. Rooftop solar panels glint in the sunlight, symbols of both environmental responsibility and financial pragmatism. In some communities, microgrids allow neighbourhoods to share power and stay resilient during blackouts. Suburbs, once criticised as energy guzzlers, could evolve into laboratories of distributed sustainability. Evening reveals the softer side of this environmental story. As the sun dips, breezes slip through open windows, carrying the scent of cut grass or blooming flowers. The heat stored in asphalt slowly seeps into the night sky, while crickets and cicadas remind listeners that nature still sings through the engineered landscape. The tension between human comfort and ecological strain is not resolved, but it is lived day by day, season by season, in every suburb on Earth. Suburbs may seem like quiet and safe refuges, but the edges of cities often carry their own risks. Built close to rivers, forests, or coastlines, these landscapes are exposed to hazards that are less visible in dense city centres. Floods, fires, and storms all interact with suburban form in distinctive ways, shaping both the vulnerabilities and the strategies of resilience. Geography here is not just about where houses are placed, but how they contend with the forces of water, fire, and shifting ground. Floods are among the most familiar hazards. Suburbs frequently expand into floodplains, those flat and fertile lands alongside rivers that look perfect for development when waters are calm. In times of heavy rain or snowmelt, however, those same plains remind everyone of their natural purpose, carrying excess water. Flood mapping, a careful process of identifying which areas are likely to flood in 100-year or 500-year events, has become essential to suburban planning. Yet the maps themselves are not fixed. Climate change, with its heavier downpours and rising seas, is redrawing these risk zones, pushing the boundaries of danger further into once secure neighbourhoods. The consequences of ignoring these maps can be severe. Streets turn into rivers, basements fill, and infrastructure struggles to cope. Insurance premiums rise sharply in high-risk areas, sometimes outpacing the value of the property itself. Communities along riverbanks or coasts wrestle with the dilemma of whether to fortify, adapt, or retreat. In some cases, levees and seawalls buy time but shift risk elsewhere. In others, planners encourage managed retreat, a difficult but increasingly discussed strategy of moving homes out of harm's way altogether. Modern approaches to flooding increasingly emphasize living with water rather than fighting it outright. Permeable pavements, for example, allow rain to soak through instead of pooling and rushing into drains. A driveway paved with porous blocks can absorb surprising volumes of water, reducing runoff into overloaded sewers. Rain gardens are another strategy. Shallow basins planted with water-loving vegetation that capture stormwater, filter pollutants, and slowly release it into the ground. Imagine a cross-section. Rain falls onto a roof, flows into a shallow swale lined with native plants, percolates into layers of soil and gravel, and finally seeps into groundwater rather than rushing straight into pipes. These simple interventions turn yards and streets into miniature sponges. China's sponge city concept takes this logic to a metropolitan scale. Instead of channeling water away as quickly as possible, sponge cities are designed to absorb, store, and reuse rainfall. Green roofs, wetlands, parks, and permeable streets all work together to soak up excess water, reducing flood risk while improving urban ecology. Suburbs, with their abundant open space, are well suited to adopting these ideas. A neighbourhood park can double as a retention basin, filling with water during heavy rains and drying out for play during calmer times. Such dual-purpose designs transform hazards into manageable, even beneficial features of suburban life. If water threatens from below, fire threatens from beyond. Many suburbs lie at the wildland-urban interface, the zone where houses meet forests, grasslands, or scrub. These landscapes offer beauty and quiet, but also exposure to wildfire. In regions such as California, Australia, or southern Europe, fire is not an occasional danger but a recurring reality. Suburbs here must adopt strategies of defensible space, creating buffer zones around houses where vegetation is thinned, lawns maintained and flammable materials kept at a distance. The principles are practical but life-saving. Clearing brush within 30 meters of a house reduces the chance of flames leaping onto roofs. Using fire-resistant building materials, like metal roofs or tempered glass, can prevent embers from igniting structures. Neighborhood-level coordination also matters. One well-prepared home is less effective if surrounding houses are vulnerable. In fire zones, resilience becomes a collective responsibility, where communities work together to manage landscapes and share resources. Fire also shapes suburban aesthetics. In high-risk areas, regulations sometimes limit the use of wooden fences or encourage the planting of native species that burn less readily. Gravel strips may replace hedges, and water tanks stand ready for emergencies. The design of these suburbs reflects not only lifestyle aspirations, but also the sobering need to confront natural hazards head-on. Living on the edge of a forest or hillside comes with a beauty that is inseparable from risk. Floods and fires are not the only hazards suburbs face. Coastal suburbs contend with hurricanes and typhoons, their houses lashed by winds and their power lines vulnerable to collapse. Earthquakes, though less predictable, can devastate sprawling neighbourhoods built on soft soils. In colder climates, ice storms bring down trees and power lines, leaving households isolated for days. Each hazard interacts with the suburban form differently, exploiting its particular vulnerabilities. Spread out power networks, long roads, or the exposure of detached homes. Resilience, then, is not just about emergency response, but about design. Suburbs can build redundancy into their systems, ensuring that when one component fails, others pick up the slack. Microgrids keep lights on when central power fails. Elevated homes reduce damage in flood zones. Greenbelts can act as fire breaks, doubling as parks in peacetime and barriers in crisis. Even small-scale actions like planting shade trees to reduce heat or installing backflow preventers on sewers accumulate into significant resilience when multiplied across thousands of households. Insurance and policy add another dimension. In many countries, governments subsidize flood or fire insurance to make suburban life affordable in risky areas. While this provides relief for households, it also creates moral hazards, encouraging development in places where, ecologically speaking, settlement may not be wise. Balancing fairness, affordability, and long-term safety is one of the hardest challenges suburban planners face. Each decision ripples outward, shaping not only the risk today, but the geography of hazard decades into the future. Despite these dangers, life on the suburban edge continues to attract. People are drawn by the promise of space, quiet, and connection to nature, even when that nature carries risk. Suburbs by rivers enjoy the shimmer of water views. Homes on hillsides command breathtaking panoramas. Neighbourhoods near forests relish the scent of pine or eucalyptus after rain. The same features that endanger also enchant, and suburbs exist precisely because humans are willing to navigate that balance. Hazards will never disappear entirely, but suburbs are not powerless. By embracing designs that absorb water rather than repel it, by planning defensible landscapes against fire, and by creating flexible infrastructure that bends rather than breaks under stress, suburban communities can turn vulnerability into resilience. These strategies do not erase risk, but weave it into the fabric of daily life, where awareness and preparation become part of the geography of comfort. Suburbs are often imagined as seas of detached houses, each on its own plot of land with a driveway and garden. That picture, while common, is far from the only possible suburban form. Across many regions, there has been a renewed conversation about how to gently increase the number of homes without disturbing the sense of calm that draws people to the edge in the first place. This is where the idea of gentle density enters, modest additions of housing types that blend seamlessly into existing neighbourhoods, filling what planners sometimes call the missing middle. The missing middle refers to the range of housing forms that sit between single-family homes and large apartment complexes. Think duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, courtyard apartments, townhouses, and laneway homes. These forms are not towers looming over backyards, but rather smaller, human-scale dwellings that fit into suburban patterns while offering more choices for families, young adults, and retirees. For decades, zoning codes in many countries squeezed these options out, creating a sharp divide, either a house on a lot or a large block of flats. The result was a scarcity of alternatives, which in turn fueled housing shortages and rising prices. A duplex, for example, looks at first glance like a single house. In reality, it contains two homes under one roof, either side by side or stacked vertically. To the street, it might present the same pitched roof, front lawn, and porch as any other home. Yet inside, two households live independently. Sometimes duplexes come with unintentional humour. Neighbours so close your Wi-Fi says hello. But beyond that, they embody efficiency. They allow twice as many families to enjoy the same patch of land with no radical change to the look or feel of the neighbourhood. Fourplexes offer another gentle solution. These compact buildings house 4 separate units, often arranged around shared stairwells or clustered with private entrances. In older suburbs, fourplexes can be nearly indistinguishable from large single-family homes, their density hidden in plain sight. Courtyard apartments extend this logic further, providing clusters of small units around a shared green space. These designs create community while maintaining privacy, allowing residents to enjoy both social interaction and personal retreat. Laneway homes, also known as carriage houses or backyard cottages, add yet another layer. Built on the same lot as an existing house, usually facing an alley or rear lane, they provide independent living spaces without expanding the footprint of the neighbourhood. Sometimes they house extended family members, sometimes renters, sometimes even serve as studios or offices. They bring life to overlooked corners of the block and make use of infrastructure that is already in place. The idea of gentle density is not simply about numbers, it is about form. Planners increasingly talk about form-based codes, a shift from regulating what a building is used for to regulating how it looks and fits into its surroundings. Instead of banning duplexes outright, form-based codes allow them so long as they maintain the same height, setbacks, and massing as neighbouring houses. This approach keeps the suburban character intact while broadening the spectrum of housing types available. Transit-oriented development pockets illustrate how this principle scales up. Around a rail station or major bus stop, suburbs can cluster a mix of homes, shops and services in slightly higher densities. Residents in these pockets enjoy walkable access to transit while still living in predominantly suburban settings. The key is that the density rises gently around the transit node and then tapers back to the quieter fabric of single-family streets. This pattern balances accessibility and tranquility, letting people live with fewer cars while maintaining the suburban lifestyle. What makes gentle density so powerful is its invisibility. Many of the most beloved neighbourhoods in older cities are filled with missing middle housing, leafy streets lined with duplexes, row houses, and low-rise apartments. People walking through them rarely notice the density because it is woven gracefully into the fabric. Suburbs that embrace these forms can grow more inclusive, welcoming a broader mix of residents without losing their calm. The ecological and social benefits are substantial. Higher densities support better transit, reducing reliance on cars. They make local shops more viable by increasing customer bases. They allow elderly residents to downsize within their community rather than leaving altogether, and they create affordable options for young families trying to step into the housing market. In short, gentle density keeps suburbs dynamic, preventing them from becoming frozen in a single demographic or economic mould. Of course, change can spark resistance. Some fear that duplexes or small apartment blocks will disrupt the character of a neighbourhood, yet experience often shows that when built thoughtfully, these forms blend seamlessly. The difference between a large single-family home and a fourplex of similar size can be hard to detect unless you step inside. The key lies in design: pitched roofs, setbacks, porches, and gardens that echo the prevailing style. Suburbs evolve more gracefully when density is introduced quietly, almost imperceptibly. Energy efficiency is another argument in favour. A fourplex uses less land, requires fewer resources per household, and often results in lower energy use due to shared walls. This makes gentle density not only socially and economically beneficial, but also environmentally sensible. The suburbs of the future will need to balance comfort with sustainability, and missing middle housing is one of the gentlest ways to achieve that balance. The cultural side is worth noting too. Gentle density introduces more diversity of lifestyle into suburbs. Renters and owners, young adults and retirees, families and singles all find space. Shared courtyards or common walls encourage interaction without forcing it, adding subtle layers of community to areas often marked by isolation. A street with a mixture of detached houses, duplexes, and laneway homes feels richer, more varied, and more resilient than one with a single type of dwelling repeated endlessly. Suburbs have always been about aspiration. The search for space, quiet, and security. But aspiration can evolve. Today, many aspire to live in communities that are not only comfortable, but also affordable, inclusive, and sustainable. Gentle density offers a way to meet these goals without breaking the suburban calm. It provides a middle path, avoiding both unchecked sprawl and overwhelming towers, finding balance in forms that fit seamlessly into existing patterns. Suburbs, like people, grow older. What begins as a fresh development of new homes, young trees, and bright asphalt eventually matures, weathers, and transforms. Aging suburbs reveal themselves in small details: the cracks in driveways sprouting weeds, the street trees grown tall and stately, the shopping centre with more empty units than open ones. These edges of the city, once symbols of modern life, slowly enter a second act, where maintenance, reinvestment, and reinvention all shape their trajectory. One of the most visible markers of suburban aging is the tree canopy. When a suburb is first built, saplings line the streets, offering little shade and standing awkwardly in oversized tree pits. Decades later, those same trees spread wide branches overhead, casting leafy tunnels across roads and sidewalks. Their shade cools the pavement, their roots push against curbs, and their leaves filter sunlight into shifting mosaics. Yet street trees also age and decline. Some succumb to disease, others outgrow their space, and others simply reach the end of their natural lives. Suburban communities must think about succession, planting new trees before the old giants fall, ensuring the leafy character continues for future generations. The story of a suburb can often be read in its breeze, from skinny saplings to venerable oaks. Beneath the ground, infrastructure tells another tale of time. Water mains, sewers, and electrical lines all have lifespans. After 50 or 60 years, pipes corrode, joints weaken, and systems need replacement. Digging up suburban streets to replace utilities is costly and disruptive but inevitable. Each cycle of replacement reveals how deeply suburban life depends on hidden systems. Residents may grumble at detours and torn-up pavements, but the process is a form of renewal, much like pruning branches or repainting a weathered house. Without it, the suburb cannot continue to function. The housing stock itself ages visibly. Roofs wear out, siding fades, and interiors drift out of fashion. Shag carpets and avocado green kitchens once felt modern, only to later become nostalgic or even comical. Some houses are lovingly renovated, adapting to new tastes and technologies. Others are neglected, showing peeling paint, sagging porches, or cluttered yards. As decades pass, the contrast between reinvested homes and those left behind becomes stark, producing a patchwork of vitality and decline on the same street. Maintenance, or the lack of it, becomes a geography in its own right. Commercial spaces also face aging. The strip mall that once bustled with shoppers may now stand half empty, its neon signs flickering and asphalt cracked. Yet these sites often find new purposes. Across many suburbs, dead malls have been reborn as medical campuses, community colleges, churches, or even residential complexes. A cavernous former department store may house a gym or a call centre. Parking lots give way to apartment blocks or office parks. The adaptability of suburban retail landscapes demonstrates a kind of recycling, turning decline into opportunity. In some cases, entire neighbourhoods undergo infill development. Older lots with modest houses may be subdivided or redeveloped into larger homes, duplexes, or townhouses. This reinvestment can spark tension. Some welcome the renewal, while others lament the loss of original character. Infill development, however, reflects the life cycle of land use. Suburbs, like cities, evolve with shifting demographics and economies. What once met the needs of families in the 1960s may no longer serve the families of today. Cultural change adds another layer to the story. Aging suburbs often shift in demographics as new immigrant communities settle in. Houses may gain new colours, shops may feature different cuisines, and places of worship may change hands or multiply. What once was a quiet, homogeneous enclave can become a lively, diverse neighbourhood, its identity rewritten by the people who call it home. This transformation can breathe fresh energy into areas once thought stagnant, reminding us that suburbs are never truly static. Nature too participates in the cycle of aging. Cracks in asphalt become tiny gardens, with mosses and grasses taking hold. Birds and squirrels find mature trees far more hospitable than the barren, sapling landscapes of the past. Rain erodes edges, creating puddles and small wetlands where frogs and insects appear. Over decades, the ecological character of a suburb deepens, sometimes despite human intention. A yard once dominated by the lawn may become shaded by mature trees, supporting a rich undergrowth. The edge between human and natural slowly shifts as time works its subtle transformations. Schools, libraries, and other civic anchors reflect suburban life cycles as well. A primary school built for baby boom generations may close or shrink decades later if enrollment falls, only to rebound when new families arrive. Libraries reinvent themselves with digital services, maker spaces, or community rooms, no longer just quiet stacks of books but lively hubs of activity. Even playgrounds and sports fields evolve, equipment replaced, pitches resurfaced, amenities added to meet changing expectations. These cycles mark the rhythm of reinvestment, breathing life back into aging spaces. The resilience of suburbs often lies in their capacity for reinvention. Some neighbourhoods decline sharply, suffering from disinvestment and neglect. Others adapt, layering new uses over old frameworks. A church becomes a community theatre, a former big box store becomes a high school, a cul-de-sac is pierced with a pedestrian path. Each adaptation shows how suburbs, despite appearances of stasis, are dynamic landscapes, rewriting themselves as needs change. Of course, not all reinvention is smooth. Infill can lead to gentrification, pricing out long-time residents. Redevelopment can erase architectural heritage or disrupt social networks. Renewal requires balance, finding ways to preserve community while updating form. Suburbs in their second acts must negotiate these challenges carefully, lest the promise of renewal becomes a source of division. Still, the broad arc is clear: suburbs age, and with age comes both decline and potential. From cracked sidewalks sprouting dandelions to retrofitted malls glowing with new life, the second act is as much a part of suburban identity as the first. These landscapes, once shiny and new, grow into maturity with all the wrinkles, scars, and surprising strengths that time brings. Suburbs have always been shaped by the daily rhythm of leaving and returning, morning commutes into the city, evenings spent back on quiet streets. Yet that rhythm has been shifting. Work is no longer tied so tightly to downtown towers, and schooling too is adapting to changing schedules, shifting demographics, and new technologies. The suburb, once defined by the flow of commuters, is increasingly becoming a place where more of life happens locally, in hybrid patterns that blend home, school, and work in fresh ways. Telework has been one of the most profound changes. Spare bedrooms, basements, and even corners of kitchens have transformed into offices. A desk with a laptop and a set of headphones may seem modest, but it marks a redefinition of where and how work occurs. The daily commute for some has shrunk to a short walk down a hallway. For others, hybrid schedules mix office days with home days, creating new suburban rhythms. Driveways half full midweek, coffee shops busier at 10 in the morning than at 5, local parks hosting mid-afternoon walkers who once would have been downtown. This change has also birthed neighbourhood co-working spaces. Vacant shops, repurposed libraries, and even strip mall units have been converted into small hubs where remote workers can gather. These spaces offer reliable internet, meeting rooms, and, perhaps most importantly, the social buzz missing from solitary home offices. In some suburbs, co-working hubs become the new third place, where freelancers, entrepreneurs, and employees from different companies all cross paths. They reduce the need to commute long distances while adding life to local retail areas. Schools, meanwhile, remain central anchors of suburban life, but they too are adapting. Population shifts can redraw boundaries, with children suddenly attending a different school than their older siblings did. These adjustments ripple through family routines, property values, and even traffic flows. A redrawn boundary may make one neighbourhood suddenly more desirable, while another faces falling enrolment. These invisible lines carry significant weight in suburban geographies, shaping where families choose to live and how communities evolve. Hybrid education has also made an appearance. In times of disruption, online learning supplemented or replaced physical classrooms, and the experience left traces. Some families now embrace blended models, part in-person, part remote, especially for older students. Suburbs with strong digital infrastructure are a better place for these transitions, while those with weaker connectivity risk leaving students behind. Just as the rail and road once shaped suburban growth, broadband access has quietly become a modern necessity. Safe routes to school remain a perennial concern. Suburbs vary widely in how easy or difficult it is for children to walk or cycle. Some areas have continuous sidewalks, crossing guards, and clear paths. Others leave parents reliant on daily car trips. Campaigns for safe routes often push suburbs to retrofit paths, crossings, or bike lanes, creating healthier and more independent routines for children. The way students move through the neighbourhood each morning and afternoon reflects not only family choices, but the underlying design of the suburb itself. Work and schooling together generate local microeconomies. A parent working from home is more likely to buy lunch from a nearby cafe, pick up supplies from a local store, or meet colleagues in a neighbourhood co-working space. A school event can draw families into local bakeries, sports shops, or restaurants. As fewer people leave the suburb daily, money circulates more within it, giving small businesses new chances to thrive. The suburban economy, once thought of as dependent on outside centres, begins to stand on its own feet. This shift also reshapes time. Instead of long hours locked into commuting schedules, hybrid workers may use breaks to walk dogs, run errands, or even volunteer locally. The line between work and home blurs, for better or worse. Some find the flexibility liberating, weaving together professional tasks and personal care seamlessly. Others struggle with boundaries, feeling as though work seeps into every corner of domestic space. Either way, the suburb has become the setting for more of life's daily negotiations. Not every household experiences this equally. Essential workers tied to hospitals, warehouses, or service jobs still commute in traditional ways. For them, the suburb remains a base, not a workplace. Yet even they are affected by the hybrid shift. As traffic patterns change, local services adapt, and schools experiment with new models. The suburb is a shared stage, and when some actors alter their routines, the entire performance shifts. There are environmental implications as well. Fewer long commutes can mean fewer emissions, but if home offices require constant heating, cooling, and electronics, energy savings may not be as large as hoped. Still, the reduction in peak hour congestion has visible benefits. Quieter roads, less pollution, and safer cycling conditions. The suburb that was once locked into a rigid commute economy now finds itself experimenting with flexibility, and the results ripple through both social and environmental systems. This blending of work and home also affects how people use space. Garages that once stored cars now host exercise bikes or desks. Dining rooms double as classrooms. Gardens become makeshift play areas during midday breaks. The adaptability of suburban houses, with their extra rooms and yards, has proven to be a hidden asset. Unlike dense city apartments, suburban homes often have the space to absorb new functions without overwhelming households entirely. Cultural life shifts alongside these patterns. A suburb with more residents present during the day feels different. Livelier sidewalks, fuller parks, more consistent use of local amenities. Communities may even feel safer as eyes on the street increase. At the same time, solitude is harder to come by for those working or studying from home, with every corner of the house potentially occupied. Families negotiate space, times, and quiet in new ways, turning the domestic landscape into a puzzle of overlapping needs. All of this points to an important reality. The suburb is no longer just a dormitory settlement for people working elsewhere. It is becoming a place where work, schooling, and leisure all happen together in shifting combinations. That change is subtle in some places and dramatic in others, but it is reshaping the very identity of suburban life. Suburbs are often caricatured as places where the car reigns supreme, where every errand, commute, or social visit begins with the turn of an ignition key. While this is partly true, the story is more complex. Suburbs contain an evolving ecosystem of mobility, where buses, trains, bicycles, and even feet play crucial roles alongside the automobile. Beyond the driveway lies a broader geography of movement, one that reveals how communities strive to connect people safely, sustainably, and efficiently. Buses are the unsung workhorses of suburban transit. Their very flexibility makes them invaluable. Routes can be adjusted, extended, or altered as neighbourhoods grow. Yet frequency remains the critical factor. A bus that comes once an hour feels like a lifeline only in emergencies. A bus that comes every 10 minutes feels like a service you can rely on. Many suburbs struggle with this balance. Sparse populations and winding road patterns make it hard to run frequent services, but those that manage it transform mobility. A reliable bus allows teenagers, seniors and workers without cars to navigate daily life with independence, shrinking the sense of isolation that low-density areas sometimes impose. In some places, microtransit has emerged as a nimble alternative. Think of small shuttles or vans that operate on demand, booked through apps, weaving through cul-de-sacs to collect passengers. They bridge the gap between rigid bus routes and private cars, making it easier to connect suburban households to train stations, shopping centres, or major bus corridors. Microtransit shows that flexibility matters. It responds to the unique geometries of suburbs where long, looping streets and low ridership make conventional bus networks inefficient. Trains, when present, anchor entire suburbs. A commuter rail station or light rail stop becomes a magnet for housing, shops and offices. People will walk or cycle to catch a train that reliably whisks them into a city centre faster than a car crawling through traffic. Japanese suburbs perfected this model. But it exists across Europe and North America too. The catch is the last mile, the distance between a home and the station, too far to walk comfortably, too short to justify driving. The last mile is where suburban mobility often stumbles. Solutions abound. Feeder buses, bike share docks, and even covered walking paths all aim to make that connection easier. Where the last mile is solved elegantly, trains flourish as suburban arteries. Bicycles, long dismissed as impractical in spread-out suburbs, are making a comeback thanks to new technology. The rise of e-bikes has extended the comfortable range of cycling from a few kilometres to 10 or even 20, flattening hills and shrinking distances. Suddenly, a trip to the grocery store or a train station becomes feasible on two wheels. Suburban bike paths, once designed mainly for leisure rides, now double as commuting routes. The soft whir of an evening e-bike coasting down a quiet street adds a new note to the suburban soundscape, hinting at a shift in habits. Cycling also thrives where safe infrastructure is present. Protected lanes, smooth surfaces, and secure bike parking transform the perception of risk, encouraging more riders and making suburbs feel more connected. Walking, the oldest form of mobility, remains essential too. Sidewalks and safe crossings dictate how easily residents can move without a car. Some suburbs, built in eras that prioritised vehicles, lack continuous sidewalks, leaving pedestrians stranded at the edges of wide roads. Retrofitting sidewalks may seem mundane, but it changes lives. Children can walk to school safely, seniors can stroll to parks, and neighbours can meet without needing to drive. Traffic calming measures, narrower lanes, speed bumps, raised crosswalks, add to this, shifting the balance back toward human scale. Streets designed for pedestrians feel not only safer but also more sociable, encouraging encounters and lingering. The importance of these alternatives goes beyond convenience. They shape equity and inclusion. For households without cars, whether by choice or necessity, buses, bikes and sidewalks mean access to jobs, education and healthcare. For teenagers too young to drive, or elderly residents no longer comfortable behind the wheel, non-car options are lifelines. The more robust these systems, the less isolating suburbia becomes. Environmental benefits matter as well. Every trip made by bus, train or bike reduces emissions compared to the same journey by car. Suburbs that expand their mobility choices contribute meaningfully to climate goals while also improving air quality locally. They also reduce congestion, as even small shifts away from solo driving ease pressure on crowded roads. The gains accumulate quietly, one bus rider, one cyclist, one walker at a time. Of course, change requires investment and imagination. It is not enough to scatter bus stops or paint a bike symbol on the road. True transformation comes when mobility is treated as a system. Buses run often enough to be trusted. Bike paths connect destinations rather than dead-ending into traffic. Train stations are surrounded by housing and shops, not just seas of parking. Microtransit integrates seamlessly with apps and ticketing. Sidewalks form the continuous networks. When all these pieces align, the suburb becomes a place where mobility feels flexible and human-scaled, not just dependent on metal and asphalt. The social side of mobility is easy to overlook but just as powerful. A bus stop bench becomes a place of conversation. A bike trail transforms into a daily encounter zone. A walk to the park is as much about greetings and nods as it is about exercise. Movement in this sense generates community. Suburbs with diverse mobility options offer more chances for these casual connections, enriching daily life in ways that cars alone cannot. Evening offers a glimpse of this future. Picture a street where an e-bike hums softly past. A bus glides along with its interior lights glowing, and neighbours cross safely at a raised crosswalk while children ride scooters ahead. Cars are still present, but they share space with other rhythms of movement. The suburb becomes not just a place of houses, but a web of connections, where choices abound and independence is accessible to all. Policies set the bedtime story. Policy may sound dry, but in suburbs it quietly shapes almost everything, from how wide a driveway is to whether a corner store can exist near your house. The decisions embedded in zoning codes, ordinances and regulations are not abstract. They are the invisible architecture behind daily life. Explaining them calmly, and perhaps with a touch of humour, reveals how these levers work and why they matter. Take parking minimums. For decades, many suburbs required that every new building provide a set number of parking spaces. The logic seemed straightforward. People drive, so they will need parking. But the results were extraordinary. Restaurants were told to provide spaces for every few seats. Shops needed lots bigger than the stores themselves. Apartment buildings were hemmed in by sprawling asphalt aprons. In some cases, the area required for parking equaled or even exceeded the footprint of the homes. A single parking space can cover as much ground as a small studio apartment, yet it often sits empty much of the time. These rules made driving easier but locked suburbs into low-density forms, reducing the chances for walkable centres or compact housing. Today, some communities are rethinking these requirements, scaling them back or abolishing them entirely. The effect is subtle but powerful. Less asphalt, more room for building, trees or parks. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, provide another gentle policy shift. Legalizing them allows homeowners to build small secondary dwellings on their lots, a converted garage, a backyard cottage, or an apartment above the garage. For many decades, such units were discouraged or outright banned, framed as threats to neighbourhood character. Yet they offer affordable housing, multi-generational living options, and efficient use of land already served by pipes and wires. When policies allow ADUs, suburbs become more flexible. A young adult can live independently but close to family. An elderly parent can move into a smaller unit while remaining in the community. A homeowner can earn rental income to help cover rising costs. These small shifts ripple outward, adding resilience and variety without dramatic upheaval. Mixed-use zoning represents another lever with broad consequences. Traditional suburban codes strictly separated residential, commercial, and industrial uses, drawing sharp lines between where people live, shop, and work. This separation reduced nuisances, but also forced endless driving. One area for sleeping, another for eating, another for working. Mixed-use zoning allows more blending. Apartments above shops, cafes next to offices, and small groceries near houses become possible again. For residents, this means errands by foot, encounters with neighbours, and a richer street life. For suburbs, it reduces the monotony of endless single-use zones, introducing pockets of vibrancy that feel alive at different times of day. Tree ordinances may sound like a niche concern, but their impact is profound. Suburbs with strong protections for trees enjoy cooler streets, cleaner air, and healthier ecosystems. Ordinances can require developers to plant new trees, preserve existing ones, or contribute to canopy targets. They recognise that trees are not just decoration but infrastructure. They shade pavements, intercept rain, and improve mental well-being. Losing mature trees to careless development can change the feel of an entire street. Protecting them ensures that suburban comfort extends into the future as new generations enjoy leafy canopies planted by those who came before. Value capture for transit offers yet another tool. When new rail or bus lines are built, property values near stations often rise. Value capture policies allow some of that increase to be reinvested back into the transit system itself. This creates a virtuous cycle. Transit makes suburbs more desirable, which raises land values, which in turn funds more transit improvements. Without value capture, the benefits flow only to landowners, while transit agencies struggle with costs. With it, the gains are shared, and the system becomes more sustainable. Suburbs connected by reliable, well-funded transit benefit directly, with better mobility and less reliance on cars. Policies like these might seem like fine print, but together they shape the experience of suburban life. Parking minimums create seas of asphalt or compact, walkable places. A DU legalisation unlocks housing options hidden in backyards. Mixed-use zoning either forbids or permits small neighbourhood shops. Tree ordinances ensure that future summers will be shaded rather than sweltering. Value capture builds the economic backbone for transit. Each decision, taken quietly in council meetings or planning offices, translates into the geography of everyday life. It is tempting to view policy as abstract rules, but in suburbs it is closer to choreography. Regulations guide where people walk, how they meet, what they see when they step outside their doors. A community that reduces parking minimums may discover new plazas and housing forms. One that enforces tree ordinances may find itself cooler and more pleasant as climate warms. Another that embraces mixed-use zoning may see the return of corner groceries or cafes that once seemed lost to time. Policy also operates on different timescales. Some changes, like permitting ADUs, can show effects within months as homeowners build or convert units. Others, like tree ordinances, take decades to manifest fully as saplings grow into giants. Patience and vision are required because the benefits accumulate slowly but persist for generations. Suburbs that think long-term build not just houses, but legacies of comfort, resilience, and adaptability. Even humour has a place in policy. Consider again the parking space the size of a studio apartment. Once you start noticing the amount of land devoted to asphalt, it is hard to stop. Whole landscapes of possibility lie hidden beneath rules that seemed minor at the time. Adjusting those rules can be liberating, creating space for homes, shops or parks where once there were only cars. Policy may not sparkle like neon or tower like skyscrapers, but its quiet influence runs deeper than many realise. Explained calmly, the lesson is this: suburbs are shaped not only by individual choices, but by collective decisions. Every ordinance, every code, every requirement is a thread woven into the fabric of daily life. Tug on one thread, and the whole pattern shifts. Parking lots shrink, trees grow tall, small cottages appear behind houses, buses arrive more frequently because transit has been funded sustainably. These are not accidents, but outcomes of levers pulled quietly yet decisively. The suburb by day is one thing: cars in driveways, school buses trundling past, lawns alive with the chatter of gardeners or the hum of mowers. But by night, it changes character. The edges soften, the pace slows, and a new atmosphere drifts over the houses and streets. Taking a slow walk through a suburb after dark reveals not only its physical form but its sensory soul. the way light, sound and scent mingle in the quiet hours. The first thing noticed is the rhythm of footsteps on the pavement. Each step echoes slightly, bouncing off houses that stand back from the road, softened by the hedges and lawns. The sound is steady but subdued, a reminder that suburban streets are rarely crowded after dark. Instead of the overlapping voices and footsteps of a city centre, here there is one walker, one pair of shoes, and a wide silence into which each step settles like a stone into water. Porch lights dot the streets like sentinels. Some are bright, flooding driveways with pools of pale yellow. Others glow faintly, more decoration than security, casting warm halos on front steps. A few flicker as motion sensors trigger, responding to a passing cat or the rustle of leaves. Together they form a constellation at ground level, guiding the way between patches of shadow. Through curtains and blinds, the glow of warm windows gives the impression of lanterns hung inside, each one telling a different story of domestic life. A late-night meal, a flickering television, someone bent over a laptop. Hedges line many sidewalks, their outlines dark against the lighter surfaces of concrete. In the breeze they murmur, faintly, leaves brushing against one another like whispered conversations. Some are neatly trimmed, squares and spheres sculpted in careful order. Others spill over fences or grow ragged, forming soft shadows where animals linger unseen. The night walk reveals hedges as more than decoration. They are boundaries, habitats, and acoustic dampers softening the hard edges of houses and streets. Wildlife thrives in these in-between zones. A rustle announces a raccoon clambering out of a yard, its eyes catching the light like tiny sparks before it disappears again. In another region, it might be a fox trotting silently along a sidewalk, tail held low, pausing to sniff the air before vanishing into a hedge. Suburbs, with their mix of human order and ecological scraps, are ideal habitats for such adaptable creatures. They emerge when the humans retreat indoors, taking over pavements and lawns like night shift residents. Their presence adds a secret liveliness, a reminder that suburbs hum with life even when they appear still. The soundscape deepens as the walk continues. From far off, faint whistles carry through the air, perhaps from a late soccer practice or a baseball game still wrapping up. The voices of players rise and fall, carried on cool breezes, mingling with the low thrum of a highway somewhere beyond the neighbourhood. A car door slams in the distance, followed by the muffled hum of an engine receding. Crickets or cicadas fill the background, their persistent rhythms layering a natural soundtrack over the artificial hums. The mixture is delicate, human order, mechanical persistence, and the ceaseless pulse of biology. In some places, the moonlight is strong enough to carve clear shadows across driveways and lawns. A cul-de-sac under the moon feels like a stage set, its curve perfectly still. Houses turned inward around a central circle. Cars glint faintly under their coats of dew. Mailboxes stand as silent markers, the kind that hosted wave-by diplomacy during the day, now reduced to silhouettes. The cul-de-sac, so lively with children's games and neighbourly chatter in daylight, becomes almost meditative under the moon, an arena of quiet geometry. Walking past windows, each glimpse carries a fragment of story. A kitchen table littered with homework and cereal boxes, a dog watching from behind glass, ears perked at the sound of passing footsteps. A flicker of blue light marking a living room where a family movie night runs long. These scenes, though partial and fleeting, stitch together a sense of shared humanity. The houses may be separate, the fences distinct, but within each is a variation on the same drama of daily life winding toward rest. Scent accompanies the walk too. Gardens exhale the sweetness of night-blooming flowers. Freshly watered lawns release the sharp smell of damp grass, a whiff of grilled food lingers from a late barbecue. Occasionally the air carries the faint tang of asphalt, cooling after the heat of the day, or the mineral freshness of rain if showers passed earlier. These scents mix with the crispness of evening air, giving each street its own subtle perfume. Details reveal themselves slowly. A bicycle left against a garage, gleaming faintly in porch light. A chalk drawing on the sidewalk, its colours muted but still visible under moonlight. A swing set in a backyard, creaking faintly as the breeze nudges it. Small signs of daytime energy linger, frozen in place until morning revives them. The night walk makes the familiar, strange, ordinary spaces tinged with the quiet magic. The farther one walks, the more apparent the layering of human and natural rhythms becomes. Streetlights mark the main routes, but their glow often competes with the stars overhead. In some suburbs, the sky is washed pale by city lights. In others, constellations reveal themselves clearly, framed by rooftops and treetops. The quiet allows stargazing from a driveway or cul-de-sac, turning an ordinary suburban street into a makeshift observatory. Looking up, one sees how even the most domesticated landscapes remain part of larger cosmic geographies. The presence of water sometimes enters subtly into the scene. A storm drain gurgles with leftover rain, or a retention pond reflects the moon, its surface broken by ripples from frogs or insects. These hydrological traces, so often invisible by day, reveal themselves in sound and reflection at night. A simple ditch beside a road becomes a ribbon of stars mirrored in water, a suburban reimagining of a river's edge. The walk eventually circles back toward home, but the suburb now feels different. In the quiet hours, without the clutter of daytime activity, the bones of the place reveal themselves. Pavement, hedges, porches, trees, animals, lights, all combine into a landscape at once, ordinary and enchanting. The suburb is not just a backdrop for daily routines, but a stage for nightly moods, where design, ecology, and human life converge in stillness. Moonlit cul-de-sacs, porch lights glowing like lanterns, hedges whispering in the breeze, and foxes or raccoons slipping through shadows. Together they compose a sensory geography often overlooked. The night walk is not just exercise, but revelation, showing the suburb in its gentlest form, stripped of noise and hurry, dressed instead in quiet and glow. The suburb is often thought of as finished, a settled landscape of houses, roads and lawns stretching outward from cities. Yet suburbs are never static. They change with demographics, technology, policy and climate. Looking toward the future, the edge of the city will not vanish, but it will take on new forms, some gentle, some transformative, as communities adapt to pressures both local and global. The key is not to imagine dramatic revolutions, but to notice the quiet adjustments already underway, hints of what is possible without exaggeration or hype. One idea shaping suburban futures is the concept of 15-minute pockets. Rather than envisioning the entire suburb as fully walkable, planners focus on creating local nodes where daily needs can be met within a short stroll or cycle. These are places where a grocery store, school, cafe and small park cluster together, reducing the necessity of constant car trips. In some suburbs, these pockets already exist around older shopping centres or train stations. In others, they are being seeded deliberately through planning and small-scale redevelopment. The goal is not to undo the suburban character of spread and quiet, but to punctuate it with the convenient anchors that make everyday life easier. Station areas will also intensify. Around commuter rail stops or new light rail lines, suburbs are likely to see denser housing, offices and shops. The reason is simple. Transit thrives when people live nearby. A train station surrounded only by parking lots misses its potential. A station framed by apartments, cafes and small plazas becomes a lively heart for the surrounding community. These station area intensifications may introduce mid-rise buildings, tree-lined pedestrian routes, and bike connections. The contrast between the bustle of the station area and the calm of nearby residential streets illustrates how suburbs can accommodate both movement and rest. Autonomous shuttles are another possibility on the horizon. Self-driving minibuses operating on fixed routes could provide flexible mobility without the costs of large bus systems. They would be particularly useful in winding suburban streets where traditional transit struggles. A shuttle summoned by AP might collect a handful of passengers and glide quietly to a station, shopping centre or park. The technology is not without challenges, safety, cost, regulation, but as it matures, it may offer suburbs a middle path between private cars and infrequent buses. The image of a small shuttle humming through a cul-de-sac at dusk, headlights low, is no longer science fiction but a likely scenario in decades to come. Climate adaptation will shape suburbs profoundly. Heat waves, floods and storms are already pressing communities to rethink design. Lawns may give way to native plantings that require less water. Streets may incorporate permeable pavements to absorb rainfall. Trees will be planted not only for beauty, but as essential cooling infrastructure. Houses may integrate rooftop solar panels, rainwater collection, and better insulation. Parks may double as flood basins, filling with water during storms and providing green space in calmer weather. These changes may not look dramatic day to day, but over time they will redefine suburban landscapes as places built not just for comfort but for resilience. Rewilded corridors provide another glimpse of the future. As awareness of biodiversity deepens, suburbs may thread green networks through their neighbourhoods, strips of habitat connecting parks, rivers and forests. A roadside verge could be planted with wildflowers, creating corridors for pollinators. A disused rail line might become a linear park, allowing foxes, hedgehogs and songbirds to move more freely. These corridors serve ecological purposes, but also enrich human experience, offering trails for walking and cycling while softening the hard edges of built form. A suburb stitched with such greenways becomes more than a collection of houses. It becomes an ecosystem in its own right. Imagine, for instance, a typical arterial road retrofitted for the future. Today it may be a wide stretch of asphalt, flanked by parking lots and drive-thrus, noisy and inhospitable to pedestrians. Now picture the same road narrowed to calmer lanes, with dedicated busways and protected bike paths running alongside. Trees line the sidewalks, offering shade. Mixed-use buildings replace empty lots, with apartments above ground-floor shops. Stormwater swales curve gently beside the curbs, collecting runoff and filtering it into the ground. The same corridor that once divided neighbourhoods now connects them, transforming from barrier to spine. This before and after sketch captures the essence of suburban futures. Not invention from nothing, but careful reinvention of what already exists. Demographics will also play their part. As populations age, suburbs will adapt to support older residents who wish to remain in their homes and communities. Accessible housing, medical clinics, and mobility options will gain importance. At the same time, younger generations seeking affordability will reshape suburbs with new housing types and shared spaces. Multi-generational households may become more common, with backyard cottages and duplexes housing relatives or renters. These shifts will slowly erode the old stereotype of the suburb as uniform and monolithic, replacing it with greater variety and adaptability. Work patterns will continue to influence the shape of suburbs. If hybrid and remote models persist, local co-working hubs, cafes and libraries will gain new relevance as daytime anchors. Suburbs may become less dependent on central cities for employment, hosting more distributed economies of small firms, studios and service businesses. This diffusion of work reduces the dominance of the daily commute and allows suburbs to function more like semi-independent towns, integrated but not wholly reliant on their urban cores. All of these futures share one thing: they emerge gradually. Suburbs rarely experience sudden revolutions. Instead, they evolve in increments. One infill project here, one transit upgrade there, one new ordinance changing what can be built. Over decades, these small adjustments accumulate into profound transformations. A cul-de-sac that once felt isolated gains a bike path. A mall that once seemed obsolete becomes a medical campus. A train station surrounded by asphalt becomes the heart of a thriving district. The edge shifts, bends and reshapes, not overnight but step by step. The future of suburbs is not a single vision, but a palette of possibilities. Some will emphasize transit and density, others ecology and climate resilience. Some will lean on technology like autonomous shuttles, others on timeless tools like trees and paths. What unites them is the recognition that the suburban edge is not fixed but flexible. It responds to pressures, adapts to challenges, and reflects the values of those who live there. In this sense, suburbs are laboratories of quiet change. They are not frozen relics of the mid-20th century, but living landscapes capable of reinventing themselves for the 21st and beyond. Whether through 15-minute pockets, greener corridors, or climate-ready designs, they show that comfort and adaptation can coexist. The edge of the city is where imagination meets reality, where communities experiment with blending tradition and innovation. Suburbs, when seen only from a car window or a passing train, can seem simple, even predictable. Rows of houses, quiet streets, shopping plazas, and stretches of green that separate one neighbourhood from the next. Yet beneath that apparent simplicity lies a remarkably rich story, one of design, culture, adaptation, and daily rhythms. These are not empty landscapes, but living tapestries, woven from infrastructure, habit, and hope. Every sidewalk and hedge, every porch light and cul-de-sac carries the imprint of countless decisions. Some were made by planners and policymakers decades ago, setting down rules that still guide where houses stand and how streets connect. Others were made by individual households. The planting of a tree, the choice of a paint colour, the addition of a backyard cottage. Together, these small and large actions create the fabric of suburban life, which is neither entirely private nor wholly public, but a gentle blending of both. What suburbs reveal most clearly is how societies choose to grow. They are expressions of aspiration for space, for security, for community. Yet they also reveal contradictions, the desire for privacy alongside the need for connection, the craving for calm alongside the pull of mobility. Each driveway and front yard is a negotiation between independence and belonging. Each neighbourhood a balancing act between the natural and the built. Seen this way, suburbs are less about uniformity and more about diversity, in form, in culture, in the ways people shape and reshape their daily environments. Design, even when unnoticed, plays a quiet role in shaping calm. The width of a street affects whether children cycle safely. The placement of a bench at a bus stop decides if waiting feels like a chore or a pause. The presence of a tree canopy cools a summer afternoon, turning a long walk into something pleasant rather than punishing. These elements rarely make headlines, but they add up to experiences that determine how comfortable, welcoming, or isolating a place feels. The suburbs, more than most environments, thrive on these subtleties. They show how profoundly the texture of everyday life depends on seemingly ordinary choices. And it is often the smallest changes that carry the greatest power. A single tree planted on a bare street eventually grows into shade for generations. A crosswalk added near a school allows children to walk independently and safely. A bench placed along a path creates a spot for rest, conversation, or contemplation. These are not grand projects, yet they shift the atmosphere of entire neighbourhoods. One small improvement encourages another, until a suburb feels not just like a set of houses, but like a cared-for landscape. In the long view, suburbs remind us that big transformations are often the cumulative result of many quiet local actions. The suburban edge is also where resilience shows itself most clearly. Cracks in asphalt becoming tiny gardens, empty malls reborn as campuses, rail stations surrounded by new homes. These are signs that the edge can adapt. Suburbs are not static. They grow older, renew themselves, and absorb new patterns of living. They adjust to climate pressures, social changes, and economic tides. In this adaptability lies their true strength. They are less monuments to permanence than mirrors of the societies that you're. Build them, reflecting shifting needs and evolving values. So perhaps the lesson of the suburbs is that the everyday matters. Where we walk, how we gather, the sound of birds in the morning or the sight of porch lights at night. These small details make up the greater picture of comfort and community. The suburbs remind us that geography is not only about grand landscapes or dramatic skylines, but about the ordinary places where most lives unfold. In their quiet streets and glowing windows, we glimpse both the individuality of households and the collective patterns of a society finding its balance. Thank you for spending this time wandering through the suburbs tonight. It has been a calm journey across cul-de-sacs and train stations, hedges and sidewalks, policies and porches. I would love to hear about the edges of your own hometowns. The suburbs you know, the places where city meets countryside, or the neighbourhoods where you find calm. Where are you listening from? And what does the edge of your community look and feel like? Sharing these perspectives helps reveal the diversity of suburban life across the world. And for those of you who are already subscribed to this channel, thank you for being part of these explorations. For those who are new, if this gentle geography has helped you unwind, I invite you to like the video and subscribe for more calm journeys through the landscapes of our lives. For now though, let the details drift into the background, the porch lights, the hedges, the distant sound of footsteps. Let the suburb settle into a soft quiet, and let that quiet carry you toward rest. Every suburb holds its own story, just as every person listening holds their own place within a larger world. Tonight, those stories can pause, folded into calm reflection. From cul-de-sacs to train lines, from hedges to sidewalks, from edges to home, thank you for walking here. Sleep well and good night.